90 seconds and counting.
Let's see. One small stiff a man, one giant... Oh, hello, Scargazers. You're just in time. My skeleton crew and I are about to blast off for a little space exploration. Care to join us? Good. I hope you're made of the right stuff, 'cause we'll be heading freight years from terra firma, boldly going where no ghoul has gone before. Hey, pal, watch the suit or you're launch meat. Which is kind of like the man in tonight's tale. He's going places too, except his destination is a little more earthbound. It's a nasty bit of scarodynamics I call horror in the night.
Death Star. Right, just one security guard now. Okay, let's go.
You made me fucking laugh, T. I don't know why we're even putting bullets in the bloody guns.
Just trying to be prepared, that's all. Mr. Starr said he wanted it real.
Mr. Starr said he wanted it to look real. You bloody kid, it's a fucking panto we're putting on.
Know what your problem is, T? At the end of the day, you're just another jobsworth. Working for wages.
You're gonna fuck this up, aren't you?
Not me, mate. Bleeding professional. Did I tell you my idea?
Do you ever stop talking?
You should listen for a change. Aren't you tired of doing someone else's dirty work for crap money? We could do what Mr. Starr's doing. Set up a fake robin, pocket the insurance money and resell the sparkly elsewhere.
30 seconds. I suggest you shut the fuck up and concentrate.
Now, I know what you're thinking, T. How can we do it without Mr. Starr's jewellery stores and organisation? Well, that's why I got a plan B. We keep the jewels. See what I mean? Mr. Starr gets something. We get something.
Yeah, your tiny fucking mind. Nobody steals from Declan Starr and gets away with it.
There's always a first time.
Keep your fucking head down!
Jesus, gee, that was a bit of a fucking top, wasn't it?
Hey, Nick. You know that idea of yours? Like, taking the jewels and running? Well, I think you're onto something. Maybe that'll shut you up.
Next time, aim lower.
Weren't expecting that, mate, were you? son of a... I need a room.
£25 a night, sir.
I know you from somewhere.
Maybe. I've been here a long time.
I don't want to be disturbed. Comprende?
We run a very discreet establishment, sir. No one will even know you're here. Lift just around the corner, sir.
Fixer. It's Nick. Listen, I need a favour.
Who the fuck is this?
It's Nick.
Nick who?
Nick Marvin, you sorry excuser.
The number you have dialed has not been recognized. Please check your number and try again.
wait a minute!
What's so funny?
Sorry. I'm easily amused these days. What?
Nothing.
Don't take it personally. From where I'm at, everything seems a little funny.
Oh, I bet. I tell you what, sweetheart. If I wasn't feeling so under the weather, I'd be happy to amuse you all night.
You that good?
Darling, I could amuse you to death.
That'd be a neat trick. You all right? I'm all right. Back from the dead, huh?
What happened?
I couldn't just leave you to bleed to death now, could I? Mind if I sit down? Poor thing.
The fuck?
Needed a shower to get all the blood off. I hope you don't mind.
What happened?
Couldn't just leave you there down in the lobby to bleed to death now, could I? Me and Lou brought you up. Lou, the night man. You mind if I sit down? Is that your car parked up the street?
Why?
I hope it wasn't. Cops hold it away. They were swarming all over here.
Shit.
Lou was cool, though. Said no one checked in since yesterday. You're lucky. The bullet went right through. You just gotta rest, Nick.
How did you know my name was Nick?
You told me while I was undressing you. I like that part.
Did you? You got a name?
Do I need one? Poor thing. You're burning up.
I gotta get out of here.
You will.
Hello? Hey, Lou. Hey, wait a minute.
okay? You hungry? I got you a sandwich. You okay?
Must be the fever. I'm having these weird dreams. Hallucinations.
What you need is a drink. I hope you like red. I found this great little burgundy. It's a little rough around the edges, but then again, aren't we all?
Where'd you find a place open at this hour?
I know all this neighborhood secrets. Am I drinking alone? You know, Nick, you and I could really help each other.
What makes you think I need help?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe it's the hole in your shoulder. The cops crawling all over your car before they towed it away. Or maybe it's the way you never take your eyes off that briefcase.
What do you have in mind?
You need to get out of here. I need to get out of here. How about we get out of here together?
And how are we going to do that?
We go downstairs. We get in my Mercedes. And we drive.
You don't even know me. What if I'm a really bad man?
Oh, I'm sure you are. The thing is, it turns me on.
What you doing in this shithole, girl?
Something happened. A while ago, I made someone unhappy.
A guy?
How'd you guess?
There's always a guy in these stories.
He sent someone to hurt me. Do you want all the gory details?
I'll use my imagination.
Oh, God. I wish I could turn mine off. I'm sick of this place. Help me get out of here, Nick. I'm so thirsty. Help me forget, Nick. Forget.
Anything you want, baby.
What you trying to do? Snap it off? Hey! Slow down!
Have tumbled from our beds, and as far as we can tell, 3 or 4 Scud missiles have been launched.
The U.S. Congress today that all Iraqi forces have pulled back across the
Hey, Lou! Hey, Lou! I'm talking to you, arsehole! What is your fucking problem?
What's happened to me? Who are you? What do you want with me?
You still don't remember, do you, Nick?
Remember what? Cops? You're doing this, aren't you? Why are you doing this? What have I ever done to you?
It's funny, that's exactly what I said to you 5 years ago.
5 years? Laura Kendall.
It's nice to see you, Nick.
Oh my God.
Get the case. I see the shoulder's healing okay.
Looks like they're all here, Mr. Starr. You know something? This is the same place that me and Nick did that job for Dominic Kendall a couple of years ago.
It was a hit, right? He caught Kendall's wife with a driver. What was her name?
Laura. Yeah, she was shagging when we came in the door. Nick fucking massacred them.
Nice place to hide out.
How did you know he was there, Mr. Starr?
Got a call. Some woman. Said she knew I was looking for Nick. Told me where I'd find him.
Woman, eh? Guess Nick wasn't prepared for that.
You get that feeling?
Poor Nick. Perhaps if he had had reservations, he wouldn't have checked in. Maybe next time he bumps into the girl of his screams, he'll expect her. Begin launch sequence. Gotta go, creeps. 2, 1. Wow! What a massacre!
Dr. Crypt Keeper, I'm not the one with the problem here. She is.
Relationships aren't about who's right or wrong. Look, do you remember how you felt about each other when you were newlybleds? Do you want to feel the same way you felt at your marriage ceremony? Good. Then let go of what you find irritating about each other before it grows too far. which is the kind of advice the young couple in tonight's tale should take. They're fiends and lovers whose relationship is clot between a rock and a horrid place. I call this one Cold War.
I thought you said this beautiful borough had a bank.
Shut up.
How sweet, Ford. Did you French kiss your mother with that mouth?
Nice one. I said shut up, both of you. It's here somewhere, just keep an eye out. Get a move on, Cutter. Come on, we haven't got all night here. The bank's just up ahead, I know it. I near, mate. Oh, well, I don't remember asking you, ass bag. Maybe you should pay more attention to the pecking order around here, huh? Not on the face, not on the face, okay? Chill out, Cutter, just chill. All I'm trying to tell you, boss, is it ain't here, because it ain't here. It used to be a bank, now it's a laundrette. Damn it.
I'm sorry, baby. What do you want to do now?
I got a plan. You know the routine. Just keep it running, huh?
Ford, don't be such a wanker. This isn't a good idea, and you know it.
I don't know what a wanker is, and I don't care. Look, a man's got to do what a man's got to do. Who ever heard of putting a laundromat in a bank?
That's what I've been trying to tell you. It's a bad omen. Let's just get back in the car.
No can do, Princess. I was really looking forward to robbing that bank, you know that?
I know, but there'll be others. I'm telling you, this whole thing's giving me a bad feeling. Don't do this, I mean it.
Oh, come on, what's your problem? We must have done 1,000 jobs like this before now. Only the bad guys are guns, remember? Look, what could possibly go wrong? Oh, okay, party people, let's put our hands up in the air and let's all wave them around like we just... Shit.
Fool. If they don't kill you, I'm gonna do it myself.
Yeah, promises. Hey, be cool, kids. Okay, let's just be cool here. I'm a firm believer in the teachings of Buddha, and like the fat man always said, first come, first served. So we'll just be backing out of here. Not in my face. Anywhere but in my face.
Come on, easy.
Drop your gun! Drop it!
I'll just put it here. Okay, just put it there.
Drop it, bitch!
Bitch!
Shit.
Who the hell do you think you're talking to?
No! Drop it or he's dead!
In your dreams! I'm gonna wear your ears as a fucking necklace, Kato!
Don't call me Kato, bitch!
Then don't call me bitch, Kato!
Cammy, you've got every right to be breathing fire here. No one says you don't, but, the spray in that bird gun is pretty wide, honey.
Your point being?
Well, my point being, we got a better chance of getting out of here alive if you use what's between your legs instead of that thunderstick in your hands.
Suppose you're right.
Put the gun down, please.
You win.
Here, you've got to nip us some matches. Leave it out! Carry me! Go on, baby!
You bitch.
Go!
Come on, Tammy!
Bye-bye, Cutter. Wait for me! What did I tell you?
Discuss it later, just drive.
Right. Oh, shit.
Come on, baby. Come on, you can do it. Here, have some of this.
Okay.
Ow. Oh, it's gonna be all right.
Careful.
I'm doing my best.
Ah!
Still? Can't find it.
Ah! Well, of course you can't find it. That's the wrong leg.
Well, how was I supposed to know? There was a hole there.
Well, that's an old hole. The new one with the slug in it is in this leg.
Fine. You're gonna be such a wanker. You can do it yourself.
Oh, there's that word again.
I mean, it's not like you haven't been shot before. Why'd you always have to make such a big deal out of it?
Because each and every time it happens, it still hurts. Here, let me show you.
You bastard!
Ah, quit your crying. It barely grazed you. I could have done some serious damage if I wanted to.
You people are making too much noise.
Shut up, Shavy! Don't make me come up there.
Right, that's it, Ford. No more. I'm through letting you treat me like shit.
Good. Go on then, leave. You'll be back. And to the women, God said, your yearning will be for your husband, and he will dominate you. Genesis 3:16.
Not this time.
Yeah, well, that's what you said the last time and the time before that. Besides, who else would have you?
Plenty of men.
Ron, the answer is nobody. Don't you see? That's our bond. We're in this together. We're two of a kind.
I don't believe that anymore. People are more accepting.
People are shit! Look, go on, go if you want to go so bad.
Ford!
Go on, you'll be back.
You better hope not. Because if I do, you're gonna regret it. I'm leaving.
Eat one!
Excuse me, barman. Can you help me out here? I just hit town, and I'm looking for a friendly face.
Yeah? What is it you want?
Look around you, man. I think that's pretty obvious, huh? I mean, do you see any big titties rubbing up against me? Do you see me doing the bump on the dance floor with any fine-looking booty? No, you don't.
Well...
I didn't ask if you could see any one-eyed banjo-playing, big-headed deliverance types. Teeth missing and tattoos on their necks. Those, my friend, you have plenty of. No. What I need to know is, where are all the good-looking ladies, man?
How many do you need? Well, one do.
Yeah, that's fine.
Hello.
Hello.
What's your name?
Ah, and now reality sets in.
You don't know reality.
Reality sucks. I've had reality up to here. But if you must know, the name's Jimmy. Jimmy Pickett.
Hi, Jimmy Pickett. If I said I could change your reality, would you be interested?
Baby, I've been underground for so long. If you dance a little closer, I'll show you just how interested.
I'll take that as a yes.
In a big way.
You put the holes in my floor.
Shavy, I don't know shit about the holes in your floor. Sounds to me that you've been smoking the crack again, buddy. Guns are illegal. Every Tom, Dick, and wanker knows that.
Wanker, I give you the wanker. Every time you make a noise, you put the hole in the floor.
Sounds like some fucking breakfast cereal to me. Wankers. I told you you'd come back, didn't I? Cammy? Cammy? Cammy?
Ford.
What the hell have you been doing all day, baby?
I think you mean who?
Hey, that's my robe.
That it is.
This the guy you telling me about?
That's him.
I expected more.
Hang on a minute. Is this your big idea of revenge? With this guy? Okay, I apologize. I'll never shoot at you again. Now get rid of him.
Too late, Ford. This is my new partner. So, eat one!
You can't partner one of them. Jeez, I can't even believe you let him do you. Take another shower, Cammy. The thought of it's making me sick.
You racist little prick. Maybe it's time somebody taught you some manners.
Jimmy, no!
He doesn't get it, does he?
Oh, I get it, all right. You're gonna be my bitch.
Oh, Superfly, chill out. Look, this isn't about the color of your skin. In my world, there's only one thing that determines who rates and who doesn't. Simply put, are you alive or are you dead? Any more questions?
Bastard! I hate it when you do that.
I thought we agreed after Cutter, no more humans.
Then stop treating me like shit. I'm tired, Ford. I want out.
There is no way out. Face up to it. We belong together. Now tell me why. You know the answer, tell me.
'Cause we're zombies.
That's right, ghouls. The Walking Dead. Whatever you want to call us, we're no longer part of the world out there. The living can't be trusted.
Neither can the dead. Zombies! You can stick your dick in them, but you wouldn't want to feed them.
Let me go! Oh, Ford! You gotta believe me! I didn't know!
Okay, I'm coming, baby.
You ever tasted zombie blood? It's putrid. That beer has gone bad. One sip, and you are shitting your stomach lining into the bowl.
I gotta hand it to you, bloodsucker. You paint a pretty picture. Trouble is not one word of it's true.
He's right. We're no different than you.
Blasphemy! Your kind are garbage eaters. Mindless, lazy critters who live off the flesh of the dead. You feast on what we vampires throw away. Now bow down to me, bitch, and show your master some respect.
What did you call me?
A name worthy of your species. Dog.
Hey! You're gonna regret that.
Bitch. That's what I thought you said. Kiss my zombie ass! Going somewhere?
I'm going to
shoulders and shit out your throat!
Tell it to someone who cares. You can't kill us. We're already dead.
He's right. Fight's over, Count Chocula. You can walk away peaceful or in pieces. Your choice.
No, not the face. No guns to the face.
See, we're not that different after all.
Men, all vain as shit.
These zombies. Oh, so easy.
Out we go.
So, vampires can turn into bats and fly away before they hit the ground. Does that really make them that different? Okay, maybe you've got a point. That doesn't give them the right to treat us like second-class citizens. If I ever see that blood-sucking rodent again, I'm gonna break both his wings. No, those snobbish vampires don't have anything on us. That's right. Things will be a bit different now. But we'll manage. I mean, we both can't be the pretty one. Oh, did that shotgun hurt you? Here, let me help you with that, sweetie. You're welcome. Oh, there. Don't worry. I'll take care of you. Don't really have a choice. After all, we're two of a kind.
I guess Cammy and Ford won't be joining Jimmy's Fang Club anytime soon. Still, I do see a little blight at the end of the tunnel for them. If Ford's new look grows on her. So, how's our struggle with wife and death? Are we happy? Looks like they'll be headed for divorce corpse instead.
The night arrived without ceremony, as if the sun had simply abandoned the sky and left the world to stew in darkness. A thin fog clung to the streets of Hemlock Ridge, curling around street lamps and muffling the sound of the town. In that eerie stillness, shadows seemed to possess their own heartbeat, a slow thrum that matched the pulse of anyone unfortunate enough to walk under the dim glow. Jeremy Caldwell trudged along the cracked pavement, coat pulled tightly around his shoulders, hands shoved deep into pockets, and a cigarette burning low in his right hand. The smoke curled upward, a fleeting white wisp that vanished quickly into the damp night air. He had moved to Hemlock Ridge only a month prior, drawn by the promise of cheap rent and the quiet life he had imagined for himself. But the town had a different plan, and tonight he would discover it. Jeremy's apartment sat atop a small hill, a narrow 3-story building that leaned ever so slightly to the left, giving it the unsettling look of a crooked smile. The steps leading up to the entrance were slick with rain from earlier that evening, and the wooden railing creaked ominously whenever someone brushed against it. As he climbed, the cigarette had burned down to a stub, and he flicked it over the edge of the steps. The glow faded instantly, leaving him in near darkness. He paused at the door, fumbling with his keys, and in that moment, a sound made him freeze. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, echoed on the pavement below. Not his own, not any normal neighbor's, but something heavier, more deliberate. Jeremy's stomach twisted. "It's just someone walking home," he whispered to himself, though the words carried little comfort. Inside, the apartment smelled faintly of mildew and old wood. He switched on the lights, but the bulbs flickered weakly, struggling to illuminate the narrow space. The kitchen was cluttered with unwashed dishes and a faint, sour odor that reminded him he had forgotten to clean up after moving in. He shrugged off his coat and hung it on the rack, moving toward the living room, but something made him pause. A window on the far side of the room rattled gently, as though a breeze had managed to sneak inside despite all the doors and windows being shut. Jeremy approached cautiously. There was no wind, not even a hint of it. The fog outside was thick, and the glass seemed to shimmer unnaturally. He pressed his palm against the cool pane, trying to reassure himself that it was nothing, but the reflection staring back at him made his heart stutter. It wasn't him in the reflection. The figure was tall, elongated, almost skeletal, draped in a dark, tattered coat. Its head tilted slightly, and where eyes should have been, there was only darkness, a hollow emptiness that seemed to pull at Jeremy's very soul. He stumbled backward, knocking over a small end table, and the reflection was gone. For a moment, the apartment was silent again, as if nothing had happened. But Jeremy knew better. He had seen something that defied reason, something that should not exist yet stared back at him from the glass with a confidence that chilled him to the bone. His fingers trembled as he reached for the lamp, switching it on fully. Shadows clung stubbornly to the corners, thick and oily. Nothing moved, and yet the feeling of being watched remained, gnawing at him relentlessly. Determined to shake off the fear, Jeremy moved to the kitchen to make himself a drink. He poured whiskey into a glass, the amber liquid catching the faint light, and took a long swallow. The burn was welcome, a brief reprieve from the icy dread settling over him. As he set the glass down, he noticed something else, scratches along the inside of the windowsill, deep and fresh, like fingernails scraping insistently. He hadn't touched that window in days, hadn't even looked at it closely until now. And yet, there they were. Jeremy swallowed hard, every rational thought abandoned in the face of something entirely irrational. He told himself it was an animal, perhaps a raccoon or stray cat, but the scratches were vertical, deliberate, almost like letters carved into the wood. He leaned closer and squinted. There, etched faintly, were words. "I see you." Panic rose in his chest, hot and suffocating. He stumbled back, spilling the remainder of his drink onto the floor. The letters seemed to pulse in the dim light, as though alive. Jeremy forced himself to breathe, trying to calm the rising terror, but then the sound began. A whisper, soft and slithering, curling around the edges of his mind. It was impossible to locate, yet it felt close, like it was coming from every corner of the room at once. "Jeremy!" The name slithered through the darkness, drawn out, coaxing, pleading. His heart thumped violently against his ribcage. "Who's there?" he demanded, voice cracking, but the only response was the whisper, repeating his name over and over, growing louder, sharper, more insistent. In that moment, Jeremy realized he could not stay. Not here. Not anywhere near this place that seemed to breathe with its own sinister life. He grabbed his coat, stuffing his arms in frantically, and rushed toward the door. As his hand gripped the doorknob, the whispering stopped. Silence returned, thick and suffocating, pressing in from all sides. He swung the door open, half expecting something to leap out at him, but the hallway was empty. The faint hum of the city beyond was distant and hollow, distorted by the thick fog that clung to the streets like a shroud. Jeremy ran down the stairwell, taking the steps two at a time. Every creak of the old wood sounded like a shout in the quiet night. As he reached the bottom, he paused, chest heaving, eyes scanning the empty street. The fog twisted and writhed, shadows flitting in shapes that seemed almost human. And then he saw it, the same tall figure, standing under a broken street lamp across the street. Its head tilted the same way, its empty eyes, if they could be called that, locked onto him. Jeremy froze, every muscle tensing. The figure raised a hand, skeletal fingers curling in a slow, deliberate beckon. He knew, in that instant, that it wanted him. The figure did not walk, did not run, it simply glided toward him, silent, inevitable. Jeremy turned and fled, zigzagging through the narrow streets, heart pounding, lungs burning. The fog seemed to follow, curling around his legs, tugging, slowing him down. He dared not look back, dared not imagine what would be there if he did. He ran until his legs were trembling pillars of exhaustion, until the streets themselves seemed to blur around him. And then he heard it, a scraping, dragging sound like claws across stone following him. The whispers had returned, layered now, multiple voices calling his name, speaking in tongues he could not understand but somehow felt in his marrow. Every instinct screamed for him to run, yet the street before him ended at an old, abandoned church, its spire piercing the foggy sky like a skeletal finger. Jeremy had no choice. He stumbled inside the church, slamming the heavy wooden doors behind him, and collapsed against the wall, gasping for air. The interior of the church was worse than the outside. Pews were overturned, the altar broken, candles melted into grotesque shapes. Shadows clung to every corner, writhing, and the air smelled of rot and something far worse, a metallic tang that made his stomach churn. As he crawled toward the altar, he noticed inscriptions on the walls, scrawled in blood or something like it, ancient symbols that seemed to shift and writhe as he stared. He pressed his palms to his face, rocking slightly, trying to convince himself it was a hallucination. The whispers were louder here, pressing directly against his eardrums, chanting his name, singing a melody that was familiar yet utterly alien. And then the figure appeared. Not at the door, not in the shadows, but in the center of the nave, hovering just above the floor. It was taller than he had remembered, its form more twisted, more grotesque. Its tattered coat flared like the wings of a dark angel, and from the void where its face should have been came a sound. Not a voice, not exactly, but a resonant vibration that filled the church, rattling the broken windows and shaking the dust from the rafters. Jeremy wanted to scream, to run, to disappear, but his body refused. He was paralyzed by fear, rooted to the ground as the thing approached, each step silent but absolute, each movement an affirmation of his helplessness. And then the altar shifted. The inscriptions on the walls writhed and twisted, forming words he could read now, chilling in their simplicity. "You cannot hide." The figure's empty gaze bore into him, and Jeremy realized he had been wrong all along. This was not a person, not a ghost, not even an animal. It was something older, something patient, something that had been waiting for him since the moment he set foot in Hemlock Ridge. And now it was here, in the sacred place, the one place he thought would offer refuge. The whispers grew into a deafening roar, and the church itself seemed to bend, the ceiling stretching, the walls leaning inward, the floor trembling beneath his weight. Jeremy screamed, a raw, hollow sound as the figure extended its hand, skeletal fingers curling around the edge of the altar. His vision blurred, reality twisted, and for a moment he felt himself falling into the void, into darkness that promised oblivion, into the cold embrace of something that was neither dead nor alive. When he awoke, he was outside. The fog had lifted slightly, and the street lamps cast pale, tremulous light on the slick pavement. The church doors were closed, intact, as if nothing had happened. Jeremy stumbled forward, his mind a whirlwind of panic and confusion. Had it been real? Had it been a dream? But as he walked, heart hammering, he noticed scratches on the doorframe of the church, fresh and deep, words etched in jagged lines. "We will meet again." And then the whispers returned, faint but unmistakable, curling around him like smoke in the night. Jeremy ran, knowing he could never return, knowing that the night had claimed him, and that Hemlock Ridge held horrors that were only just beginning to awaken. The fog had receded, but the chill remained, crawling along Jeremy's spine like a living thing. He didn't stop running until the church was a distant shadow behind him, swallowed by the twisting streets of Hemlock Ridge. His lungs burned, every inhalation tasting like ash, and his legs felt as if they had been replaced by lead. Yet, even as he fled, the whispers trailed him, faint now, teasing, coaxing, reminding him that the nightmare was far from over. Somewhere in the fog, the thing had vanished, or so he hoped, but the sense of being hunted persisted, a silent predator stalking him through the empty streets. Jeremy ducked into a narrow alley, pressed against the brick wall, and tried to steady his ragged breathing. The city seemed to hold its breath along with him, the fog swirling like a living entity, reshaping the alleys into impossible paths. His apartment was not an option. The place itself had become a trap, a magnet for whatever had claimed him. Instead, he sought refuge in the town's one 24-hour diner, a greasy, dimly lit establishment where the neon sign flickered weakly, casting a sickly green glow onto the wet pavement. He pushed open the door, and the bell jingled, a fragile sound that did little to reassure him. The place was nearly empty, save for the night cook, a wiry man with sharp eyes and a permanent scowl, slicing something behind the counter. Jeremy slid into a booth near the back, desperate for some semblance of normality, some anchor to the mundane. The cook glanced up but said nothing. There was an unspoken agreement in these parts. Strangers were tolerated but not trusted, and the town itself seemed protective of its secrets. Jeremy ordered a coffee, black, and waited, trying to convince himself that the events of the night were a hallucination, a fevered response to his new isolation. But then he noticed something on the diner wall, a small framed photograph, faded and curling at the edges. It was a group of people, smiling for the camera, but the faces seemed distorted, elongated, unnatural. For a moment, Jeremy's stomach dropped. The central figure wore a coat strikingly similar to the tattered one he had seen in the church, and though the photograph was decades old, the eyes, hollow, black voids, seemed to follow him across the room. He looked away, focusing on the steaming mug in front of him, trying to ground himself in reality. But reality was slippery tonight, elusive, and no amount of rational thought could banish the memory of the skeletal figure, its whispered promise, its gaze that reached past the flesh and into his very soul. As he sipped the coffee, he realized something even more disturbing. The whispers were here too, faint but unmistakable, threading through the low hum of the diner, curling around his thoughts. "Jeremy." It hissed, subtle yet intimate, as though the town itself was conspiring with the thing that had haunted him. He tried to speak, to call out, but the words caught in his throat. His hands trembled, clenching the edge of the booth as if it were the last anchor to the world he knew. He could feel the presence behind him, a shadow folding into the corners of the diner, coiling patiently, waiting for the moment he let his guard down. Jeremy wanted to leave, to run, but the door seemed farther than it should, the space between him and safety stretching unnaturally. When he finally summoned the courage to rise, he noticed a movement outside the fogged glass window, a flicker, a shape, tall, elongated, the familiar tilt of the head. It was watching him. Panic surged anew. He bolted, leaving the coffee untouched, spilling a small river onto the cracked linoleum floor. The cook called something, a warning, or a protest, but Jeremy didn't hear. He didn't care. The fog outside had thickened again, curling like smoke from a great fire, obscuring the streets and alleys. He ran, faster than he thought possible, down narrow corridors, past abandoned storefronts, past the skeletal remains of trees that lined the streets like mourners. Each step echoed strangely, as if the town itself were amplifying his fear, orchestrating it, feeding it. As he turned a corner, he found himself in front of a dilapidated building, a theater long abandoned. Its marquee hung at a crooked angle, the letters spelling out nothing coherent, some missing, some faded to near invisibility. Yet Jeremy felt an unexplainable pull, a compulsion that made him step closer. The door was ajar, a dark invitation, and against every instinct screaming inside him he pushed it open. The interior was a cavern of shadows, rows of seats covered in dust, the stage at the far end cloaked in darkness. The air smelled of decay, old wood, and forgotten dreams. And then he saw them. The curtains on the stage trembled as if a breeze had found its way in, though the air was still. From the darkness a figure emerged. Not the skeletal figure exactly, but something far worse. A human-like silhouette, but stretched, warped, moving with a grace that was impossible. Its face, when it tilted toward him, was a blank canvas of darkness, eyes like pits, a mouth that was nothing but a gaping shadow. It did not speak. It did not move its lips. Yet the whisper came, slithering into his mind, coiling around his thoughts. "You cannot escape." Jeremy stumbled backward, crashing into a seat, dust and splinters filling the air. He tried to run, but the floor shifted beneath him, warping, elongating, making each step treacherous. Something touched his shoulder, a cold, dry grip that froze his blood. He spun, heart hammering, but there was nothing. Yet the feeling remained, a weight pressing against his skin, against his mind. He realized with mounting horror that the theater itself was alive, watching, hungry. The shadows moved independently, crawling along the walls, reaching out with tendrils of darkness. The whispers intensified, a chorus of voices speaking in unison, echoing from every corner, every crack, every hidden crevice. Jeremy, Jeremy, Jeremy. His name became a chant, a mantra, a chain around his mind. He tried to scream, but no sound came. The figure on stage advanced, gliding rather than walking, and Jeremy's vision blurred, reality twisting around him. He stumbled into the aisles, knocking over chairs, the shadows wrapping around him, binding him, and yet he kept moving, drawn inexorably toward the stage. There, the figure extended a hand, not human, not alive, but impossibly elongated. And Jeremy understood that it was not just a being. It was a force, a presence that had claimed the night, that had been waiting for him, feeding on his fear. A sudden flash of memory struck him. The scratches on his apartment window, the message at the church, the photograph in the diner. He had ignored the signs, dismissed them, laughed at them in private moments, but now it was too late. The figure did not wait. It had the patience of centuries, and Jeremy's terror was the final ingredient, the offering that would allow it to cross fully into his world. He fell to his knees, gasping, trying to make sense of the impossible. But the figure reached out, and the shadows followed, curling around his arms, his legs, binding him, lifting him. The whispers merged into a deafening roar, voices speaking all at once, filling every sense, erasing the world he had known. Jeremy screamed at last, a raw, unfiltered sound, and the figure's hand closed around him, not with fingers, but with the very essence of darkness, swallowing him whole. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, silence. Jeremy woke on the cold, wet pavement outside the theater. The fog had thinned, leaving a pale moon high in the sky, weak but present. He was soaked, trembling, every nerve screaming, but no figure remained. No shadow lurked. The theater doors were closed, ordinary, unremarkable. The whispers had vanished. For a moment, he dared to hope it had been a hallucination, a product of fear and exhaustion. But then he looked at his hands. Long, deep scratches marred his forearms, claw marks, and in the mud near his feet were footprints. Not his own, but tall, narrow, and impossibly elongated, vanishing into the fog. Panic returned with renewed force. He ran through the streets, searching for some sign of life, some human presence, but Hemlock Ridge was silent, empty, complicit. The fog shifted, curling unnaturally, and for a fleeting moment Jeremy thought he saw shapes moving just beyond the edge of perception. Figures in tattered coats, faces voided, eyes hollow, watching, waiting. He fled to the nearest bridge spanning the river, hoping the water, wide and cold, could serve as a barrier, a temporary respite. But the river shimmered strangely in the moonlight, reflecting shadows that did not belong to him, twisting and writhing like serpents. Jeremy's thoughts spun wildly. How could he fight something that existed beyond reason, beyond the laws of the world? He had no weapons, no allies, only the knowledge that the night was alive and that it hunted him with patience and purpose. Somewhere in the fog, the whispers returned, softer now, intimate, as though the darkness itself had bent close to speak. You cannot hide, Jeremy, not here, not ever. The night stretched endlessly, and Jeremy knew that the morning would bring no relief. Hemlock Ridge was not a town, it was a trap, a cage, and he had stumbled into the wrong part of its history, a history alive with shadows that demanded acknowledgement, obedience, and fear. He ran until his legs gave out, collapsing near the edge of the river, chest heaving, soaked, trembling. The fog rolled in again, thick, Impenetrable, and from its depths emerged the figure once more, gliding silently across the wet pavement. Its eyes, hollow voids of pure darkness, bore into him, and Jeremy understood fully that the night had claimed him. It would not let go, it would not sleep, and the whispers, oh, the whispers, would follow him forever, curling around his mind like smoke, reminding him that horror had found its mark. Morning never came the way Jeremy expected. Instead, the sky remained a dull, oppressive gray, as though the sun had been blocked by some unseen hand. The fog lingered, thinning only slightly, curling along the riverbank and through the streets, giving everything an unnatural, muted quality. Jeremy sat on the wet grass near the edge of the river, shivering, muscles stiff, staring into the dark water that mirrored the gloom of the sky. Sleep had eluded him entirely. Every attempt met with whispers, fleeting glimpses of the tattered figure, or the creeping sensation of being watched. His mind, frayed and stretched by hours of terror, clung desperately to the mundane, to the belief that this, whatever had haunted him, was temporary, fleeting, a trick of exhaustion. He had to move. Staying put meant surrender, and Jeremy wasn't ready to accept that. His legs protested as he stood, quivering with cold and fatigue, but he forced himself to walk along the river, searching for some landmark, some sign of human life. The streets were strangely deserted. Even the usual morning activity of Hemlock Ridge, the mailman, early commuters, dog walkers, was absent. It was as if the town itself had been swallowed by the fog, leaving him alone in a world built entirely of shadows and whispers. Each step was measured, cautious. Every sound, a crow, a distant car, the rustle of leaves, set his nerves alight. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was following him, something patient and persistent, moving just beyond the edge of perception. He passed a narrow alleyway and froze. A shadow shifted inside, long and thin, bending unnaturally around the corner. Jeremy's breath caught. He had no weapon, no plan, just the raw, primal instinct to survive. He shifted slightly to keep the alley out of his direct path, forcing himself to move past it, but the whisper followed him, curling around his thoughts like smoke. Jeremy. Jeremy. It was softer now, intimate, almost coaxing, but no less terrifying. He quickened his pace, eyes scanning for escape routes, anything that might offer sanctuary. Ahead, he spotted a small convenience store, its neon sign buzzing weakly, flickering on and off like a dying heartbeat. Relief surged briefly. Human presence, even a clerk behind a counter, might mean safety, might mean answers. Jeremy pushed open the door, and the bell above jingled. Inside, the fluorescent lights hummed, casting a sterile, cold glow. The clerk looked up, a young woman with tired eyes, hair pulled into a messy bun. She glanced at him, startled, but quickly returned to stocking shelves. I need help, Jeremy said, voice hoarse, cracking. He tried to sound calm, rational, but the tremor betrayed him. The clerk raised an eyebrow, wary. Help with what? She asked cautiously. Jeremy hesitated, searching for words that wouldn't sound insane. Something's following me. Something. Not human. The clerk's expression didn't change, a mixture of skepticism and faint concern. You've been up all night, haven't you? She said finally. Go home, get some sleep, maybe coffee. He shook his head. You don't understand. He stopped abruptly. From the corner of his eye, a shadow twisted unnaturally across the store floor, stretching impossibly long, bending around corners before Jeremy could track its origin. The clerk didn't seem to notice, continuing her work as if nothing had moved at all. Jeremy fled. He left behind the store, the flickering neon, the indifferent clerk, and ran into the fog. The whispers returned, a chorus now, layered and overlapping, surrounding him, pressing against the edges of his mind. You cannot hide. Jeremy, you belong to the night. Every step was a struggle, his body screaming in protest, lungs burning. He didn't know where he was going, only that moving was survival, and standing still meant surrender. Hours passed, or perhaps minutes. Time had lost all meaning. He stumbled across streets he did not recognize, through neighborhoods that seemed to shift around him, buildings rearranging subtly as if the town itself were alive, reshaping to confound him. Every corner brought glimpses of the tattered figure, emerging from fog, disappearing, always watching, always patient. Jeremy's mind teetered on the edge of collapse, a fragile line between reason and insanity. He had to find shelter, had to find a place where he could rest even briefly without the constant pressure of invisible eyes upon him. Then he saw it, a small, forgotten church, half collapsed, hidden among overgrown trees and tangled vines. Its doors were cracked, hanging on rusted hinges, but it offered the promise of enclosure, the illusion of safety. Jeremy stumbled inside, heart pounding, collapsing against a wall. The interior was dark, dust motes floating in the sparse light, the air thick with the smell of mildew and rot. Broken pews littered the floor, and an altar at the far end leaned precariously, candles long melted into grotesque shapes. He sank to the floor, back against the cold stone wall, breathing hard, trying to convince himself that he had outrun the presence, that he had escaped, if only temporarily. But the whispers began again, faint at first, then growing, curling into his thoughts with a patient inevitability. Jeremy, come to us. Jeremy. His pulse accelerated, muscles coiled for flight even as he tried to calm himself. And then the figure appeared. Not on the stage this time, not immediately, but from the shadows at the far end of the nave, gliding toward him. Its coat flared around it like dark wings, and the void where its face should have been radiated a cold, infinite darkness. Jeremy tried to move, to run, but the floor beneath him seemed to pulse, to thicken, slowing him, binding him with every step. The shadows on the walls moved independently, creeping closer, curling around his limbs, whispering, pressing against him. He fell backward, hands scrabbling for purchase, mind straining to comprehend the impossible. A sudden memory struck him, an old story he had read as a child, about a town cursed by its own darkness, where those who ventured too far were consumed by the shadows. It had seemed like fiction then, a tale to frighten children, but now every word was truth. Hemlock Ridge was no ordinary town. It was a trap, a living entity that fed on fear and patience, and he had become its latest prey. The figure advanced, and Jeremy realized that running was futile. Every instinct told him to fight, but fight with what? His hands were empty, his body exhausted, and the darkness around him seemed to sap strength with every breath. The whispers grew louder, chanting, calling, pulling at his mind. He understood then that this entity did not hunt for the sake of hunger. It hunted to instill terror, to consume the will, to bend reality until the prey was nothing more than a vessel for the night itself. He tried to speak, to demand it stop, to assert his existence, but the words caught in his throat. The figure's approach was inexorable, gliding across the floor, shadows bending with it, merging, enveloping. Jeremy's vision blurred, the edges of reality warping, twisting around him. For a fleeting instant, he glimpsed not the church, not the town, but a vast expanse of darkness, endless, infinite, filled with whispering forms, all calling his name. Jeremy screamed, the sound raw and hollow, and the figure stopped, its presence heavy, oppressive. It seemed to study him, patient, deliberate, waiting for the moment he would break entirely. The shadows around him throbbed in sync with his heartbeat, pulsing, wrapping tighter. The whispers merged into one coherent voice. You belong to us, Jeremy. Always. And then, silence. Jeremy awoke again on the riverbank, soaked and trembling, the fog thinning, the pale light of an obscured sun above. He was alone, or so he thought. Footsteps echoed faintly behind him, irregular, deliberate. He spun, heart hammering, but the street was empty. Yet he knew. He could feel it. The thing was never gone. It merely waited. It had claimed him in ways he did not yet understand, tethered his soul to the night, and even now it followed. He ran, knowing he could never stop, knowing that every step, every heartbeat, would draw him closer to exhaustion, to madness. The town of Hemlock Ridge had made its choice, and Jeremy Caldwell was ensnared. Shadows moved at the periphery of his vision, fog shifted unnaturally with every step, and the whispers, oh, the whispers, never ceased. Jeremy, Jeremy, they murmured, patient, eternal, insistent, reminding him that the night was alive and it had claimed him. The hours passed in a blur, though time seemed meaningless in Hemlock Ridge. Jeremy's legs ached with every step, his lungs burned with the cold, damp air, and yet he ran, propelled by a terror so pure it erased all thought of exhaustion. The town itself had become a labyrinth, streets folding back on themselves, alleys lengthening and narrowing in ways that defied reason. Every corner he turned revealed the same fog-thickened distorted reality, each shadow suggesting a presence that was patient, immovable, eternal. He had begun to accept the unthinkable. He could not escape, not the town, not the night, not whatever had claimed him. Desperation drove him forward. His mind raced, grasping for logic, for any way to understand what hunted him. Perhaps it was an ancient entity, bound to the town, feeding on fear. Perhaps it had been waiting centuries for someone like him, someone naive enough to wander its streets, to invite the darkness into their life with a careless step. He did not care for reasoning anymore. He only cared for movement, for distance, for survival. Each step seemed heavier than the last, weighted with the certainty that he was being drawn toward some unseen trap, orchestrated with cruel precision. Then he saw it, a faint glow through the fog, distant but distinct. A house set apart from the others, isolated, its windows faintly lit by candlelight. It looked lived in, inhabited, perhaps a place where he might find help, or at least temporary refuge. The sight of light was both relief and fear. Relief because it suggested life, fear because anything that stood out in Hemlock Ridge might be a lure. Still, he moved toward it, careful but desperate, boots squelching in the wet grass and mud. The house was small, old, leaning slightly, with shutters half-hanging from rusted hinges. The light from within flickered, casting shadows that danced across the overgrown yard, and Jeremy hesitated at the edge of the porch. The door creaked faintly as he pushed it open, stepping inside. The interior smelled of damp wood and something sweeter, unfamiliar. Candle wax, perhaps, or incense. The room was simple, sparsely furnished. A wooden table, a single chair, shelves lined with dusty books and jars, and a fireplace cold and empty. He exhaled, half in relief, half in fear. For a moment, the whispers were absent. A voice spoke then, soft, deliberate, calm. "You've been running a long time." Jeremy froze, eyes scanning the room. An elderly woman stood near the fireplace, her hair gray and pulled back, her eyes sharp and unyielding. She wore a simple dress, faded but neat, and her hands were clasped in front of her. "I can help," she said, voice steady, without a hint of fear. "But you must listen." Jeremy swallowed hard. What is it? What wants me?" His voice cracked. The words were barely audible over the thrum of his own heartbeat. The woman shook her head slightly. "It is older than you can imagine. It does not want you dead. It wants your fear. It feeds on it. It is patient, and it is everywhere." She stepped closer, hands extended in a gesture of comfort. "I have lived here my entire life. The town is bound to it. And you, stranger, have drawn its attention." "Attention? It tried to kill me." Jeremy's voice rose, disbelief and panic mixing in every syllable. "I saw it. In my apartment, in the church, everywhere. I don't understand." The woman gestured to a chair and Jeremy collapsed into it, trembling. "Understand this. Hemlock Ridge is alive. The fog, the shadows, the whispers, they are its language. The thing that follows you is not a creature in the ordinary sense. It is a manifestation, a will of the town, drawn to the most vulnerable. And it has found you." Jeremy pressed his hands to his face, trying to absorb the weight of her words. How do I survive it?" The woman's eyes softened, though her expression remained grave. "You do not fight it in the conventional way. You must resist with your mind, with your will. Fear is its path into you. If you can master fear, if you can refuse to be consumed by it, you might last longer than most. But do not think you can leave. The town. It does not release those it has claimed. Jeremy's heart sank. He had hoped for a simple solution, a way to run far enough to escape entirely. The woman's words offered no comfort, only the stark reality of his predicament. Hemlock Ridge had chosen him, and the night had not finished its work. Hours, or what seemed like hours, passed as she spoke, explaining what she could. She had learned the town's rhythm, the whispers, the movements of the shadows, the patterns of the fog. She had survived by understanding them, by keeping her fear in check, by never giving the night more than the minimum. Jeremy listened, absorbing her instructions, trying to steel his mind against the terror that clawed at his thoughts. But understanding did not prevent the inevitable. Even as she spoke, the house seemed to breathe. Shadows shifted in the corners, subtle, almost imperceptible. The candle flames flickered despite the absence of wind. Jeremy could hear it, the whisper, faint but persistent, curling around the edges of his mind. Jeremy. Jeremy. It had found him again. The woman moved to a shelf and retrieved a small, black book, worn and frayed at the edges. "This might help you," she said. "It contains knowledge of the town and its guardians. There are ways to survive, but they are temporary, and each time you resist you become more aware, stronger, but the night will not relent." Jeremy took the book with trembling hands, flipping through pages filled with handwritten notes, diagrams, symbols, and warnings. His eyes scanned passages describing rituals, patterns, and protective measures, all designed to shield oneself from the influence of the town and its dark inhabitant. He felt a small, fragile hope stir within him, though fear remained dominant, gnawing at the edges of his sanity. Night came again, faster than Jeremy expected. The fog returned with unnatural speed, curling around the house, pressing against windows and doors. Shadows stretched and shifted outside, and the whispers returned, closer now, insistent, demanding attention. "Jeremy, come to us. Come willingly." He clutched the black book, scanning for instructions, memorizing symbols, rehearsing mental defenses. The woman remained calm, moving quietly about the room, preparing candles, marking protective symbols on the floor, whispering old prayers and incantations. And then the figure appeared. Not outside, not at the door, but inside, emerging from the corner where shadows pooled thickest. It was taller, more distorted than before, its tattered coat flaring, the void where its face should have been black and endless. It did not speak. The whispers came from all directions, overlapping, filling the room, pressing against Jeremy's mind, testing his resolve. Jeremy stood, trembling, forcing himself to focus. He repeated the woman's instructions, visualized protective barriers, concentrated on the symbols etched into the floor. The shadows hesitated, curling but not advancing, whispering but not touching. For the first time, Jeremy felt a flicker of control, a fragile assertion of will against the relentless darkness. But he knew it was temporary. The figure's presence was patient, eternal. It did not attack in the conventional sense. It tested, observed, wore down, measured fear and resolve. Jeremy realized then that survival was not about confrontation, not about escape. It was about endurance. Each night would be a battle of mind and spirit, a test of resolve against a force beyond comprehension. The woman moved to Jeremy's side, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You have the knowledge now," she said softly. "Use it. Stay awake tonight. Do not let it touch your mind. The town is patient. So must you be. And remember, you are never alone, even if it feels like it." Jeremy nodded, clutching the black book to his chest. The whispers continued, now a low, constant hum, wrapping around his thoughts, pressing against his resolve. He focused on his breathing, on the symbols, on the mental exercises the woman had taught him. Hours passed in tense silence. The figure remained, patient, watching, testing, but did not cross the protective boundaries Jeremy visualized, boundaries reinforced with each thought, each act of mental fortitude. By morning, the fog had thinned once again. The figure was gone, though its presence lingered, a weight on the edges of Jeremy's awareness. Exhausted but alive, he knew that the day offered no reprieve, only a brief pause before the night returned, bringing with it the patient terror that had claimed him. Jeremy Caldwell was learning the rules of Hemlock Ridge, slowly, painfully. He was learning that the night was alive, and that survival depended on understanding, patience, and an iron will. But he also knew one thing with absolute certainty: the figure would return. The whispers would return, and the darkness, patient, eternal, would continue its game, testing, waiting, hunting. The following day, Jeremy moved cautiously through the streets, carrying the black book like a talisman. Every shadow, every ripple in the fog demanded his attention. He had memorized symbols, protective gestures, and incantations, but knowledge alone did not diminish the terror. Hemlock Ridge remained a predator, patient and deliberate, shaping the streets, the alleys, and even the air around him to instill doubt and fear. The town's reality bent subtly, unnaturally, every corner presenting potential traps. Jeremy knew that even a single misstep, a momentary lapse of will, could be fatal or worse. The woman's instructions echoed in his mind. She had spoken of safe houses, places reinforced with symbols and wards, each designed to delay the inevitable intrusion of the figure and its shadows. They were temporary sanctuaries, fragile against the patient power of the town. Jeremy's goal was simple, yet impossible: survive until he could understand the rules well enough to navigate the night without being consumed entirely. Even as he walked, he felt the subtle pressure of unseen eyes, measured, precise, analyzing him for weakness. He paused near a crumbling fountain in the town square, staring at the water that refused to reflect his image clearly. Ripples moved against the wind, and shadows stretched from impossible angles. He knew the figure would be near, even if he could not see it. The whispers, faint at first, began again. "Jeremy, Jeremy, come closer." He swallowed hard, forcing himself to focus on the protective symbols he had memorized. Each mental gesture, each visualization, acted as a shield, however fragile, against the encroaching darkness. A sudden movement caught his eye. Across the square, a child stood, half hidden by the fog, a pale, ethereal figure with eyes wide and unblinking. Jeremy froze. The child's gaze seemed hollow, yet strangely alive, and it beckoned him silently. The instinct to flee battled with curiosity, the remnants of his humanity urging him to understand what he was seeing. He stepped closer, cautious, but the figure did not move. Who are you?" he asked, voice trembling. The child tilted its head. Its lips moved, forming words that Jeremy did not hear with his ears but felt inside his mind. Follow. To understand. A chill raced down his spine. The figure flickered, becoming partially transparent as if it were both present and not, a ghost tethered to some unseen will. Jeremy knew better than to trust appearances in Hemlock Ridge, yet something compelled him forward. Step by step, he followed, through fog-draped streets, past empty shops and abandoned homes. The child led him to an old clock tower at the edge of town, its hands frozen at midnight. Ivy and moss covered its base, and the heavy iron doors groaned as he pushed them open. Inside, the air was thick, almost suffocating, and shadows clung to every corner. Jeremy's heart pounded as the child stepped aside, revealing a spiral staircase descending into darkness. Jeremy hesitated, fear and reason battling within him, but the whispers urged him onward, soft now, intimate, seductive. Come. See. He took the first step, then the next, descending into the unknown, the black book clutched tightly in his hands. The stairs twisted and narrowed, the walls damp and slick, the shadows pressing in closer with each step. He could feel the presence of the figure somewhere below, waiting, patient, eternal, yet restrained by rules he did not fully understand. At the bottom of the staircase, he entered a chamber lit by flickering torches. The air smelled of earth and decay. In the center, a pool of water reflected the torchlight, but the reflection was not his own. Instead, he saw scenes, moments of terror from the town's past, fragments of memories belonging to those who had come before him. Faces contorted in fear, hands clawing at empty air, whispers recorded in motionless mouths. Jeremy realized he was looking into the very essence of Hemlock Ridge, a repository of its history and its victims. The child was gone. In its place, the figure loomed, taller, darker, its voided face absorbing the flickering light. Shadows pooled at its feet, moving independently, stretching like black liquid toward Jeremy. The whispers became a chorus, voices overlapping, filling the chamber, pressing against his consciousness. Jeremy, you are ours. Jeremy. He recalled the woman's instructions, reciting the protective phrases and visualizing symbols etched in the air around him. The shadows hesitated, curling but not crossing the boundaries of his will. Jeremy's heartbeat was deafening in his ears, his lungs screaming for relief, yet he stood, trembling but resolute. The figure did not advance further, only studied him. Patient, deliberate, a teacher testing a student on the razor's edge between life and oblivion. Minutes, or perhaps hours, passed. Jeremy realized that the figure was not moving closer because it was measuring him, probing for weakness, gauging his resolve. Every moment of fear fed it, but every moment of will resisted its influence. The chamber, the water, the shadows, they all obeyed a set of rules, complex and cruel, and understanding those rules was Jeremy's only chance. He approached the pool, staring at the reflections of the past victims. Their faces twisted in terror, yet there was a subtle pattern in their fear. Jeremy understood then. Hemlock Ridge thrived on terror, but terror without comprehension was its sustenance. Knowledge, understanding, awareness, these were shields, defenses against the consuming darkness. He needed to study, to learn, to prepare. Every instinct told him to flee, yet he knew that the true challenge lay here, in understanding the mechanisms of the town and its patient predator. He sank to the floor beside the pool, opening the black book, scanning passages that detailed the history of Hemlock Ridge. Each page revealed new horrors, townsfolk who had vanished, buildings that shifted in impossible ways, nights that lasted indefinitely, whispers that infiltrated minds, bending reality itself. Jeremy's stomach churned, but a small spark of hope ignited. Knowledge was power, and if he could grasp it fully, he might endure longer than the others, might withstand the night. The figure remained silent, shadows pooling at its feet, observing. Jeremy realized that fear alone was not enough to destroy him. He needed strategy, understanding, patience. He memorized the passages, practiced visualizing protective symbols, rehearsed mental defenses. The whispers twisted around him, teasing, testing, yet he repeated the phrases, reinforcing the barriers in his mind. Hours blurred. Hunger, cold, and fatigue pressed against him, but he remained seated, focused, refusing to give the darkness more than the minimum. The figure shifted occasionally, shadows undulating, but it did not advance. Jeremy's resolve solidified. The night, the town, the whispers, they could be resisted, at least temporarily, through discipline and comprehension. As dawn approached, or what passed for dawn in Hemlock Ridge, the fog thinned. The figure retreated, shadows collapsing into corners, whispers fading to a low hum. Jeremy remained beside the pool, exhausted but alive. He understood that survival depended not on fleeing, but on learning, understanding, and enduring. Hemlock Ridge was patient, eternal, but so too could be the will of a human mind prepared to resist. Yet even in this fragile moment of reprieve, Jeremy felt the weight of inevitability. The night would return, the shadows would return, the figure would return, and the whispers, patient and eternal, would continue to call his name. Survival was not escape. It was endurance, a relentless struggle against the patient darkness of Hemlock Ridge. Jeremy stood, closing the black book, the first glimmers of resolve mingling with his lingering terror. He would continue, step by step, night by night, learning the rules of the town, preparing for the inevitable encounters, and clinging to the fragile hope that knowledge and willpower could offer. Hemlock Ridge had claimed many before him, yet he was determined to endure, to confront the night with awareness however fleeting, however fragile. As he ascended the spiral staircase leaving the chamber behind, he felt the fog pressing closer, the whispers teasing once more, reminding him that the town watched, waited, and measured. Jeremy Caldwell had entered the game, a participant in a ritual older than comprehension, a prey tested by shadows and whispers. But he was learning, he was awake, and for now, that was enough. The day dragged on with an oppressive weight, as if Hemlock Ridge itself refused to allow the sun to warm its streets. Jeremy moved cautiously, every step deliberate, eyes scanning the fog-wrapped buildings and abandoned alleyways. Even though the morning light pierced the gray haze, the town remained unwelcoming, as though the day had been stolen and the night's dominion extended indefinitely. Each shadow he passed seemed to twitch at the edge of his vision, refusing to settle, and every creaking signpost, every rustling leaf, whispered its own warning. He carried the black book tightly, a fragile lifeline against the encroaching terror, and repeated protective symbols in his mind with every step. He knew now that the figure did not merely appear. It tested, measured, and studied, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Patience was its weapon, its whispers a trap designed to erode his resolve. The woman's words echoed in his memory. Fear is its path. Knowledge is your shield. Willpower is your weapon. Jeremy clung to that mantra, pressing onward through the fog-choked streets of Hemlock Ridge. By mid-afternoon, he found himself at the edge of town, where the old cemetery sprawled, overgrown and neglected. Headstones leaned at impossible angles, marble cracked and weathered, names worn away by decades of rain and wind. The fog was denser here, curling between the tombs, and the air held the smell of damp earth and decay. Jeremy hesitated, the instinct to flee warring with the knowledge that somewhere here lay clues to survival, rituals, inscriptions, perhaps forgotten knowledge. He stepped forward carefully, boots sinking into the wet soil, and the whispers began almost immediately. "Jeremy, you cannot hide. Jeremy!" The voice was close now, intimate, resonant, echoing from every direction. Jeremy clenched his fists, reciting the protective phrases in the black book, visualizing the symbols in the air around him. The shadows seemed to recoil slightly, but the whispers persisted, a constant pressure against his mind. He moved among the tombstones, scanning for inscriptions, symbols, anything that might offer guidance. A headstone, larger than the others and engraved with intricate symbols, drew his attention. The carvings were worn but still legible, depicting arcane shapes and patterns that resonated with the protective marks he had learned. He traced them with his fingers, feeling a strange warmth and a subtle sense of stability. For a moment, the whispers softened, as though acknowledging the temporary sanctuary the symbols provided. Then, movement caught his eye. Across the cemetery, the tattered figure emerged from the fog, gliding silently among the tombstones. Its face remained a void, absorbing the dim light, and shadows spilled from it like ink across the ground. Jeremy's pulse quickened, but he did not flee. He knew better now than to run blindly. Every movement, every hesitation was observed, measured, and exploited. The figure stopped at the edge of a crumbling mausoleum, tilting its head, observing Jeremy with patience that stretched eternity itself. The whispers intensified, layering over each other, filling Jeremy's mind with a cacophony of voices. "Jeremy, come to us. You cannot resist." Jeremy forced himself to breathe steadily, repeating the protective incantations, visualizing the symbols in the air and on the ground around him. The shadows hesitated at the periphery, curling but not advancing. Slowly, Jeremy stepped forward, toward the mausoleum, toward the figure, aware that direct confrontation was not his goal. Observation, learning, endurance, these were his tools. Fear alone would destroy him, but understanding might allow him to endure. Inside the mausoleum, the air was stale. heavy with centuries of decay. Dust motes floated in the faint light that seeped through cracks in the stone, and the shadows within seemed thicker, more substantial, as if the darkness itself had weight. The figure followed silently, hovering at the threshold, its presence oppressive but restrained. Jeremy's heart hammered, but he pressed on, moving to a stone altar in the center, etched with the same protective symbols he had memorized from the Black Book. He traced the carvings with his fingers, repeating the ancient words aloud. The shadows recoiled slightly, the whispers faltering, then returning with renewed intensity. The figure drifted closer, and Jeremy felt the chill of its void face pressing against his awareness, testing his resolve. He understood then that this was not an ordinary predator. It did not hunt for flesh or blood. It hunted for fear, for surrender, for the collapse of will. Survival depended on resistance, not on flight or confrontation. Jeremy sat beside the altar, opening the Black Book once more. He studied diagrams and inscriptions, realizing that the town itself could be read, like a complex language composed of fog, shadow, and whispered intent. Each street, each alley, each abandoned building was a sentence, each movement of the shadows a punctuation mark. Understanding the grammar of Hemlock Ridge offered temporary control, a shield against the relentless pressure of the night. The figure remained at the entrance, patient and silent. Jeremy knew it could wait indefinitely, that time was on its side. He could not falter, could not allow his mind to succumb to exhaustion or despair. He repeated the protective incantations, visualized barriers of light and symbols, and focused on understanding the town's patterns. Every twitch of the shadows, every ripple of fog offered insight, teaching him the rules of the game he had unwillingly entered. Hours passed in tense observation. The figure occasionally shifted, shadows stretching and bending, but never crossing the boundaries Jeremy maintained with his mind and voice. The whispers continued, a constant pressure, but he responded with discipline, countering each suggestion of fear with visualization, repetition, and focus. Slowly, a fragile equilibrium emerged. The figure would not advance so long as Jeremy maintained vigilance, so long as he understood the rules and reinforced his defenses. A sudden movement at the entrance caught his attention. Another figure, smaller, more human in appearance, stepped into the mausoleum. Jeremy froze. The figure looked like a man dressed in tattered clothing, face pale and hollow, eyes sunken yet alert. It did not speak, only observed, tilting its head as though measuring Jeremy's resolve. The whispers shifted subtly, acknowledging the presence of the newcomer. Jeremy realized with a jolt, the figure was not alone. Hemlock Ridge was a hive of consciousness, each manifestation a piece of the whole, patient, coordinated, eternal. The town's power was distributed, testing, observing, waiting for the moment when fear would crack his defenses. Survival was no longer a matter of isolated encounters. It was a matter of enduring the collective intelligence of the town itself. He forced himself to remain calm, focusing on the protective symbols, visualizing barriers, repeating the incantations. The smaller figure advanced slowly, but Jeremy held his ground. Each step it took was a lesson, a measure of his discipline, a test of whether he could maintain control over his own mind. Hours, or perhaps minutes, he could not tell, passed in tense silence. The figures did not attack. They did not speak. They observed, waited, tested. Jeremy's muscles ached, his body burned with fatigue, but he held firm, refusing to surrender to the whispers, the shadows, the relentless patience of Hemlock Ridge. By the time the first pale light of dawn seeped into the mausoleum, the figures had receded into the shadows, the whispers fading to a low hum. Jeremy remained seated by the altar, exhausted but resolute. He understood that survival was not about fleeing or fighting in the conventional sense. It was about learning, understanding, and enduring, maintaining willpower and discipline in the face of a patient, eternal adversary. He rose slowly, closing the Black Book, his mind racing with observations and insights. Hemlock Ridge was alive, a complex organism of fog, shadow, and whispered intent. Its patience was infinite, its intelligence subtle and distributed. The figures were extensions of its will, testing, observing, and teaching in their own dark, incomprehensible way. Jeremy knew that he had survived another night, but the next encounter would demand even more. As he stepped out of the mausoleum, the fog hung thick over the cemetery, curling around tombstones like living tendrils. The whispers lingered, faint and insistent, reminding him that the town watched, waited, and he measured every action. Jeremy Caldwell had survived through understanding, through discipline, and through a fragile assertion of will. But Hemlock Ridge was patient, eternal, and it had many nights yet to teach him the rules of its dark dominion. Jeremy emerged from the cemetery into the muted gray of Hemlock Ridge's late afternoon. The fog was lighter now, but it still carried that oppressive, unnatural weight, curling along the streets and pressing against the corners of buildings as though the town itself were alive. Every footstep echoed too loudly, yet not loudly enough to mask the subtle creak of shadows shifting just beyond his vision. He kept the black book close, thumb tracing the worn edges, symbols and incantations etched into his mind, a fragile shield against the patient darkness. The woman's instructions had been clear. Hemlock Ridge could be understood, temporarily controlled, but never defeated. Every alley, every corner, every house contained subtle cues if one knew how to see them. The slight distortion of a window frame, a shadow lingering longer than physics should allow, the way the fog curled unnaturally around certain areas. Each was a word, a sentence, a fragment of the town's language. Jeremy's mind worked constantly, translating these signals into strategy, a pattern of survival. He paused near an abandoned bookstore, its windows cracked and dusted with grime. The door hung crookedly on its hinges, but inside, he thought, there might be something useful. Old texts, notes, perhaps another fragment of the town's hidden logic. He pushed the door open, the hinges groaning like a low moan, and stepped inside. Dust floated in the narrow beams of fading light, motes glimmering in the eerie half-darkness. Shelves leaned at impossible angles, books teetering, some open as if left mid-read centuries ago. Jeremy moved cautiously, scanning the room for anything that might aid him. As he brushed past a shelf, a book tumbled to the floor. He bent to pick it up, and the whispers began again, softer this time, like a low murmur threading through his consciousness. Jeremy, you cannot hide. We are everywhere. He swallowed hard, forcing himself to focus on the protective symbols he had memorized. The shadows in the corners hesitated, lingering, stretching, then recoiling slightly as if acknowledging his defenses. The book in his hands was fragile, its pages yellowed and crumbling. Inside, handwritten notes described townsfolk who had disappeared, their accounts of strange occurrences, and sketches of protective symbols similar to those in the black book. Jeremy's pulse quickened. Every detail was a clue, every fragment a lesson. He traced the diagrams with his finger, murmuring the incantations aloud, reinforcing the mental barriers against the encroaching shadows. A sudden sound startled him, a floorboard creaking upstairs. Jeremy froze, his mind raced. There should be no one here. The town was deserted, yet the whispers suggested otherwise. He gripped the book tighter, visualizing protective symbols around him, rehearsing the mental defenses the woman had taught him. The shadows did not advance immediately, but he could feel their presence, patient, analyzing, waiting. A figure emerged from the staircase, taller than a man, elongated, its coat tattered, face a void that absorbed the dim light. Jeremy recognized it instantly. The tattered figure, patient and eternal, always measuring, always observing. He took a slow, deliberate breath, repeating the protective incantations, visualizing the symbols in the air around him, grounding himself against the whispering pressure. The figure did not move closer immediately. Instead, it shifted subtly, shadows writhing at its feet, curling like dark smoke. The whispers layered over themselves, a chorus of distant and intimate voices. Jeremy, come to us. Your fear feeds us. Jeremy held firm, repeating the protective phrases, fortifying his will, remembering the lessons learned in the mausoleum and the cemetery. Time lost meaning. The figure moved intermittently, testing, probing, never directly attacking. Jeremy understood now that confrontation was futile. Survival depended on endurance, on understanding the patterns of the town, on recognizing the subtle cues that indicated the figure's intentions. Each step, each twitch, each ripple in the fog was a message, and comprehension was his only defense. Hours passed in tense observation. Jeremy moved carefully among the shelves, his eyes scanning every shadow, every flicker of movement. The figure followed silently, patience incarnate, its voided face absorbing light, its presence pressing on him without contact. Jeremy's mind was a battleground, fear pressing from every angle, but he repeated the protective symbols, visualized barriers, and recited the incantations. Then something shifted. The figure paused near a pile of collapsed books, and Jeremy noticed a subtle distortion in the air, a ripple, faint but real. He leaned closer, curiosity overcoming fear for a moment. The black book offered guidance. Wherever reality seemed to bend, there might be knowledge, fragments of understanding. He reached toward the distortion, and the whispers intensified, overlapping, urgent, demanding. "Jeremy, do not touch. It is ours." Ignoring them, he traced a hand through the ripple. The air shimmered, and he was suddenly overwhelmed with visions, fragments of the town's past, moments of terror, disappearances and rituals long forgotten, faces twisted in fear, shadows moving independently, whispers echoing across decades. Jeremy staggered backward, gasping, but he held the black book before him, anchoring his mind. The visions receded, leaving him trembling but alive. Understanding dawned. Hemlock Ridge was a repository of fear, a living archive, and the tattered figure was its agent, testing the boundaries of his comprehension. Survival depended not on avoiding the figure entirely, but on engaging with the town's patterns without succumbing to fear. Knowledge was the shield, and comprehension was the weapon. The figure drifted closer, and Jeremy realized it was not attacking, only observing. He met its voided gaze, forcing his mind to remain firm. The whispers twisted into a single, coherent phrase. Jeremy. Understand or perish. His pulse quickened, but he focused, repeating protective symbols, visualizing barriers, tracing diagrams from the black book in his mind. Slowly, the figure receded, retreating into the shadows as though acknowledging the temporary equilibrium he had established. Jeremy collapsed into a chair, chest heaving, adrenaline mingling with exhaustion. The town outside remained shrouded in fog, whispering, alive, eternal. He had survived another encounter, but the lesson was clear. Hemlock Ridge was patient, distributed, and tireless. The tattered figure and its shadows were not mindless predators. They were teachers, testing his endurance, measuring his comprehension, preparing him for the inevitable next night. As evening fell, the fog thickened again, pressing against the broken windows of the bookstore. Jeremy knew that survival would demand more than courage. It required meticulous attention, observation, and unwavering will. The night would return, bringing the tattered figure, the whispers, and the ever-shifting shadows, and he would be ready, or he would fail. He opened the black book once more, tracing symbols, memorizing incantations, rehearsing protective rituals. Every detail mattered. Every observation could be the difference between survival and surrender. The whispers were constant now, softer, patient, reminding him that Hemlock Ridge was watching, measuring, waiting. The tattered figure would return, as would its shadows, each encounter testing the boundaries of his mind, body, and spirit. Jeremy Caldwell understood now that the nights ahead would be battles of comprehension and endurance. Each step taken in awareness, each ritual observed, each symbol visualized, was a claim against the relentless pressure of the town. Fear was the enemy, knowledge was the ally, and willpower was the weapon. He had survived, for now, but the game had only just begun. As darkness deepened, Jeremy closed the black book, feeling the oppressive weight of the fog pressing against the bookstore walls. Shadows twisted in the corners, hints of movement just beyond perception. The whispers faded to a low hum, patient, eternal, reminding him that the town never slept, never forgot, and never forgave. He prepared for the night as the woman had instructed, marking protective symbols on the floor, repeating incantations, visualizing barriers around himself. Every muscle, every thought, every breath was a conscious act of resistance. The tattered figure, lurking somewhere in the fog, could wait indefinitely, but Jeremy would endure, step by step, night by night, learning the rules of Hemlock Ridge and asserting his fragile dominion over fear itself. The night arrived, inevitable and patient. The fog thickened, curling through the streets, and the whispers returned, insistent, seductive, probing. Jeremy repeated the rituals, reinforced mental barriers, and focused on comprehension. The tattered figure emerged from the darkness, gliding silently, shadows writhing at its feet, testing the strength of his will. Jeremy stood firm, understanding now that survival was not about avoidance or escape. It was about knowledge, discipline, and enduring the relentless patience of the night fell like a suffocating blanket over Hemlock Ridge. Thick fog curling through the crooked streets, winding around broken signposts and abandoned buildings. Jeremy felt the weight of it pressing against him, a living entity, patient and observant. The black book rested in his hands, a fragile lifeline tethered to reason. He had survived multiple nights, endured encounters with the tattered figure, and learned the subtle grammar of the town, the way shadows moved, how whispers twisted, the slight distortions in reality signaling danger. But survival did not diminish fear. It sharpened it. Each night demanded vigilance, focus, and a relentless assertion of will. The streets were silent, yet the whispering began almost immediately, soft and coaxing. "Jeremy, we see you. We are everywhere. Come." He pressed his palms together, repeating the protective incantations, visualizing the symbols he had memorized, reinforcing mental barriers. The shadows at the edges of his vision flickered and shifted, but did not advance. Each step he took was deliberate, slow, measured, a calculated negotiation with the town itself. He understood now that Hemlock Ridge was a sentient predator, patient and tireless, and his only weapon was comprehension. As he moved, he noticed a building he had not seen before. A narrow, twisted house, leaning as if the fog itself had pushed it askew. The windows were opaque with grime, but a faint light flickered from within. He paused at the threshold, hand hovering over the door. The whispers intensified, a chorus pressing against his mind. "Jeremy, enter. It is yours. Learn." He swallowed hard and stepped inside, boots squelching on the damp floor. The interior was cramped, the air thick with the scent of decay and candle wax. Shelves lined the walls, cluttered with jars, old tomes, and objects Jeremy could not identify. The faint glow came from candles placed around the room, their flames flickering as if alive. At first, the room seemed empty, but then he saw her, a figure seated at a wooden table, hunched, writing in a faded journal. She did not look up as he entered. "Jeremy," she said softly, voice calm but carrying weight. "You are learning, but understanding is only the beginning. The town is patient, eternal. Each night it will test you, observing every thought, every twitch of fear, every hesitation. Knowledge alone is not enough. You must anticipate, adapt, endure." Jeremy swallowed, nodding. I understand. I think I'm beginning to understand, but it never stops. The shadows, the whispers, they're constant. Even when I think I've survived, the night returns. It waits. The woman glanced up from her journal, eyes sharp and penetrating. "Yes, that is the nature of Hemlock Ridge. It does not rest, it does not forgive, but each time you survive, you grow stronger, more attuned. Each night you endure, you gain understanding, and with understanding comes a fragile power." Jeremy felt a flicker of hope, but knew it was tempered by reality. "How long can this last? How many nights before?" His voice trailed off. The town does not release those it claims, she said simply. You are bound, as all are. Survival is measured in nights endured, in the patience you cultivate, in your ability to resist. And sometimes the town rewards effort with small truths, fragments of clarity hidden among the fog and shadows. Jeremy turned toward the window, peering into the swirling fog outside. The streets were empty, yet he could feel the pressure of unseen eyes, the subtle movements of shadows stretching and contracting just beyond perception. He shivered, forcing himself to focus, repeating the protective phrases, visualizing the symbols in his mind. The woman rose, moving to a shelf and retrieving a small, black vial filled with a dark liquid. "This may help," she said, placing it before him, not with the figure itself, but with the influence of the town. A single drop, consumed with intent and focus, can heighten your awareness, strengthen your connection to the Black Book, and sharpen your defenses. Use it wisely. Jeremy hesitated, staring at the vial. The thought of consuming an unknown substance was frightening, yet the desperation that had driven him through the past nights compelled him forward. He uncorked the vial, the liquid thick and dark as ink, and swallowed. A warmth spread through him almost immediately, tingling along his spine, sharpening his senses. The whispers became clearer, more distinct yet less intrusive, as though he could filter them through the heightened focus granted by the vial. "Good," the woman said. "Now you will see more clearly. The town communicates in subtle cues, in the movements of shadows, in distortions of reality, in whispers layered with intent. You are beginning to hear it, to see it, to understand it. But beware. Understanding invites attention. The figure will notice your clarity and test you more rigorously." Jeremy nodded, gripping the Black Book tightly. He felt the energy from the vial coursing through him, sharpening his awareness, strengthening his resolve. The tattered figure's presence outside the house was almost palpable, patient, watching, waiting. The fog thickened, arrowlined, curling around the building as though the town itself leaned in, observing his actions, measuring his will. Hours passed. Jeremy moved through the room, arranging protective symbols on the floor and along the walls, practicing the incantations, memorizing diagrams, visualizing barriers in intricate layers. The whispers shifted, subtle and continuous, probing for weakness, testing his comprehension. Shadows in the corners pulsed faintly, responding to his mental discipline. Then, a sudden movement at the window drew his attention. The tattered figure stood outside, tall and imposing, its voided face absorbing the candlelight, shadows pooling at its feet. The whispers intensified, a chorus of layered voices. "Jeremy, you are learning, but understanding is not enough. You must endure." Jeremy held his ground, visualizing the protective symbols, repeating the incantations, feeling the effects of the vial sharpen his focus. Time stretched unnaturally. Minutes passed as if they were hours, yet Jeremy remained firm, refusing to yield to the pressure of the figure and its shadows. The whispers became a low hum, constant and insistent, pressing against his consciousness, but he filtered them, focusing on the mental constructs he had reinforced. The figure did not advance, only observed, patient, deliberate. Finally, the fog outside began to thin slightly, the first hints of dawn approaching. The tattered figure retreated into the mist, shadows collapsing at its feet. Jeremy exhaled, exhaustion mingling with a fragile sense of accomplishment. He had survived another night, had maintained control against the relentless testing of Hemlock Ridge, and had deepened his understanding of the town's patterns. The woman approached him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Each night is a lesson. Each encounter strengthens you if you survive, but do not grow complacent. The town is patient. The figure is eternal. The whispers will continue. And the shadows always return." Jeremy nodded, gripping the Black Book. He understood now that survival was not a simple matter of avoiding danger, but of engaging with the town's complex logic, maintaining willpower, and enduring the relentless pressure of its eternal consciousness. The nights would continue, each one a test, each encounter a lesson, each whisper a challenge to his understanding. As he stepped outside, the streets of Hemlock Ridge lay quiet, bathed in the pale light of dawn. The fog lingered, curling along the edges of buildings, teasing him with unseen movements. The whispers had faded to a low hum, but their presence lingered, reminding him that the town never rested, never forgot, and never forgave. Jeremy Caldwell moved forward cautiously, black book in hand, aware that the tattered figure in the shadows would return with nightfall. Each step was deliberate, every observation intentional. He was learning, adapting, enduring. Fear was no longer his master, though it lingered at the edges of his mind. Knowledge, discipline, and patience were his allies now, fragile and fleeting, but enough to carry him through the relentless testing of Hemlock Ridge. Night would return. The whispers would return. The shadows would return. And Jeremy would endure, step by step, night by night, learning the rules, asserting his fragile dominion over fear, and preparing for the endless trials that lay ahead. Hemlock Ridge had claimed many before him, but he was beginning to understand its language, its patterns, its eternal patience. And in that understanding lay the first glimmer of hope that survival might yet be possible. The fog had not lifted by midday, and Hemlock Ridge seemed to stretch endlessly under its oppressive gray blanket. Jeremy moved carefully through the twisting streets, eyes scanning for subtle distortions, faint movements in shadows, and the almost imperceptible signs that the town itself offered him. He had learned that survival required not just vigilance, but interpretation, reading the language of Hemlock Ridge as one might read a living text. Every creak of a sign, every ripple in a puddle, every flicker of shadow contained meaning if one knew how to see it. The black book remained tightly clutched in his hands, pages worn and fragile. He had memorized protective symbols, incantations, and the layouts of previous safe houses, yet the tattered figure, patient and eternal, remained a constant threat. Jeremy knew it could strike at any moment, yet understanding the patterns of its movement allowed him to anticipate its tests. The figure's patience was infinite, its observation relentless. The challenge was enduring it, step by step, night by night, without yielding to fear. As he rounded a corner near the old theater, a sudden movement caught his eye. A shadow flickered across the fog, then paused, elongated and distorted. Jeremy froze, senses heightened by the lessons of previous nights. The whispers began softly, a coaxing murmur threading through his consciousness. Jeremy, we see you. The game continues. Come. He pressed his palms together, visualized protective symbols in the air around him, and repeated incantations quietly under his breath. The shadow halted, as though acknowledging his barriers, then slowly retreated into the fog. He pressed onward, drawn toward the theater. Its windows were darkened, the marquee long decayed, letters hanging crookedly. The doors creaked as he pushed them open, revealing a lobby choked with dust and debris. The air smelled of mold and decaying wood. Shelves and display cases lined the walls, filled with faded posters, old tickets, and remnants of the past. He stepped carefully across the floor, mindful of loose boards and shards of glass. In the center of the lobby, a faint glow emanated from a hallway that led deeper into the building. Jeremy moved toward it cautiously, senses alert, every instinct sharpened by months of exposure to Hemlock Ridge's subtle terrors. The whispers intensified as he approached. Jeremy, you are learning, but understanding is not enough. You must endure. He pressed his palms together, focusing, visualizing symbols, reinforcing mental barriers. The shadows in the hallway flickered, pooling and stretching in response to his concentration. A figure appeared at the end of the hallway, tall and tattered, voided face absorbing the dim light. Jeremy's pulse quickened, but he did not flee. He knew now that panic would be fatal. Endurance, comprehension, and discipline were his only defenses. The figure's shadows writhed at its feet, moving independently, testing the boundaries of his mental barriers. The whispers overlapped, a cacophony pressing against his consciousness. Jeremy advanced slowly, careful not to provoke the figure unnecessarily. Each step was measured, deliberate, an act of negotiation with the town's intelligence. The figure did not attack, only observed, tilting its head as though evaluating his willpower. He repeated protective incantations, visualized symbols, and traced diagrams from the black book in his mind. The shadows recoiled slightly, acknowledging the fragile equilibrium he had established. The hallway narrowed, walls seeming to close in as the fog thickened. Jeremy felt a subtle distortion in the air, a ripple that indicated another layer of the town's language, a hidden message in the geometry of the building itself. He traced the edge of the ripple with his hand, and for a brief moment visions flickered before him, images of those who had come before, whispers of their fear, fragments of their knowledge. Faces twisted in terror, shadows writhing, the town observing, teaching. He staggered back, breath catching, but the black book anchored him. The protective symbols he had memorized glowed faintly in his mind's eye, reinforcing his mental barriers. The whispers became coherent. Jeremy. See. Understand. Endure. He realized that the visions were not random. They were lessons, instructions hidden in terror, offering guidance to those willing to pay attention. Knowledge was power, comprehension was a shield, and endurance was the weapon against Hemlock Ridge. The figure advanced slowly, shadows writhing, testing his will. Jeremy met its voided gaze, refusing to flinch. The whispers pressed closer, teasing, probing, but he focused on the mental exercises, visualizing the protective symbols and reciting the incantations. The shadows recoiled at the boundaries of his will, acknowledging the fragile control he had established. Hours, or perhaps minutes, time distorted as always, passed in tense observation. Jeremy moved carefully through the lobby, each step a test of discipline and focus. He noted the subtle cues, the way shadows shifted when he hesitated, the ripple in the fog when he focused too long on a single symbol, the whisper's cadence changing in response to his mental barriers. Each observation was a lesson, each fragment of comprehension a tool for survival. A sudden noise from above startled him, a floorboard creaking as if someone were moving. Jeremy froze, muscles tensing, eyes scanning the darkness. The tattered figure did not move immediately, but he could feel its attention shift, measuring, calculating. The whispers intensified, layering over themselves. Jeremy. They watch. They wait. You cannot hide. He pressed his palms together, visualized the symbols, repeated incantations, and forced his mind to remain focused. The sound ceased, leaving only the hum of the fog and the faint movement of shadows. Jeremy exhaled slowly, aware that Hemlock Ridge was observing, testing, teaching. Each encounter strengthened him, expanded his comprehension, and reinforced the fragile control he could assert against the town's relentless patience. He moved toward the hallway again, careful, deliberate, every sense alert. In the center of the hallway, a door stood slightly ajar, light flickering from within. Jeremy approached, hand hovering over the handle. The whispers shifted subtly. Jeremy, do you dare? Do you understand? He gripped the black book tightly and pushed the door open. Inside was a small theater room, rows of seats decayed and sagging, stage curtains moth-eaten and hanging crookedly. On the stage, a small table held a single candle, flickering as if breathing. The tattered figure stood near the edge of the stage, voided face absorbing the candlelight. Shadows pooled at its feet, writhing, stretching toward him. Jeremy stepped forward, maintaining the protective symbols, repeating the incantations, visualizing barriers. The whispers became a chorus, layered and persistent, but he filtered them through his heightened awareness, focusing on comprehension and endurance. The figure did not advance further, only observed, testing the limits of his control. He moved to the table on the stage, examining the candle and the objects surrounding it. A faint inscription along the edge of the table matched symbols in the black book, a protective glyph designed to anchor awareness and resist intrusion. Jeremy traced it with his finger, murmuring the corresponding incantation. The shadows recoiled slightly, the whispers faltered, and he felt a momentary sense of control, fragile but real. The tattered figure remained, patient, eternal, a teacher and a predator in one. Jeremy understood now that survival was not about fleeing or fighting in the conventional sense. It was about comprehension, endurance, and discipline. Fear alone would destroy him. Understanding provided a temporary shield, and willpower was the weapon. Hours passed in tense observation. The candle flickered, casting long shadows across the decayed seats. The whispers persistent but manageable through discipline and focus. Jeremy noted every movement, every distortion in the fog outside the theater windows, every ripple of shadow in the room. Each was a lesson, each observation a fragment of the town's complex language. As dawn approached, the fog outside began to thin slightly. The tattered figure receded toward the shadows, leaving Jeremy alone on the stage. He exhaled, exhaustion mingling with a fragile sense of accomplishment. He had survived another night, maintained control, and deepened his understanding of Hemlock Ridge's patterns. The whispers softened to a low hum, reminding him that the town never rested, never forgave, and never forgot. Jeremy grasped the black book tightly, knowing that survival depended on continued vigilance, comprehension, and endurance. The nights would continue, each one a test, each encounter a lesson, each whisper a challenge. Jeremy Caldwell had survived through understanding and discipline. Hemlock Ridge had claimed many before him, but he was beginning to grasp its language, its logic, its relentless patience. And in that understanding lay a fragile glimmer of hope that survival, though temporary and precarious, was possible. The morning sun, pale and weak, filtered through the fog-choked streets of Hemlock Ridge, casting a dim, sickly glow over the town. Jeremy moved cautiously, every step measured, senses sharpened by months of exposure to the town's patient malevolence. The black book rested in his hands, its pages worn, fragile, and imbued with the knowledge that had allowed him to survive countless nights. Yet, the tattered figure and its shadows were never far behind, lurking in corners of perception, waiting for moments of hesitation. He paused near the edge of the abandoned marketplace, a wide, empty expanse where stalls had long since rotted away and the ground was cracked and uneven. Shadows pooled along the walls of surrounding buildings, twisting unnaturally. The whispers began immediately, low at first, then rising in intensity. Jeremy, we see you. We measure. We wait. He pressed his palms together, visualizing protective symbols, repeating the incantations he had memorized, and feeling the subtle reinforcement of his mental barriers take hold. The marketplace stretched endlessly under the gray fog, stalls collapsing into the ground, wood and metal twisted by decades of neglect. Jeremy's eyes scanned every shadow, every crack in the pavement, every flicker of movement that might indicate the tattered figure's presence. Understanding had become his weapon, discipline his shield, and patience his armor. The town itself communicated in subtle cues, and he was learning to read them, translating each ripple of fog, each distortion of light into actionable information. From the corner of his eye, he noticed a flicker of movement, a shadow elongating and bending as though the very light itself were retreating from it. The whispers intensified, threading through his mind with insistent repetition. Jeremy, you cannot hide. You cannot resist. Come. He drew a deep breath, grounding himself, and moved deliberately toward a narrow alley at the far end of the marketplace. The alley was claustrophobic, walls leaning in as if conspiring against him. Fog curled along the cobblestones, and the air carried a faint metallic tang. The tattered figure emerged from the shadows at the alley's mouth, tall, imposing, void-faced, its presence suffocating. Shadows pooled at its feet, writhing and twisting, creeping toward Jeremy with subtle intent. The whispers overlapped, layered and chaotic, but Jeremy filtered them, repeating protective incantations, visualizing the symbols around him, and holding his mental focus. He advanced slowly, deliberately, stepping over broken crates and discarded debris. Every motion was measured, a negotiation with the town's intelligence. The figure remained still for a moment, then glided forward, testing the limits of his concentration. Jeremy met its voided gaze, refusing to flinch, and felt a subtle shift in the shadows. They recoiled slightly, acknowledging the temporary equilibrium he had established. The alley opened into a small courtyard, the remnants of a fountain long dry and overgrown with weeds. Jeremy approached the fountain, tracing symbols from the black book along its cracked edges, murmuring incantations aloud. The whispers pressed closer, insistent, probing for weakness, but he reinforced his mental barriers, visualizing protective glyphs in layers, complex and interwoven. Shadows writhed at the periphery, stretching but not crossing the boundaries he maintained. A faint ripple in the air caught his attention, a subtle distortion in the fog that indicated the town's presence, its language of warning and instruction. Jeremy traced the ripple with his hand, and the whispers shifted, forming coherent phrases. Jeremy, understand, endure, the lesson is near. His pulse quickened, but he focused, understanding that these cues were essential for survival. Knowledge was his shield, comprehension his weapon, and endurance the only path to continued existence. The tattered figure advanced once more, shadows pooling, writhing at its feet. Jeremy held firm, reciting incantations, visualizing symbols, and filtering the whispers through his heightened awareness. He realized now that the figure was testing not only his ability to maintain control, but also his understanding of the town's subtle language. Every twitch, every ripple, every distortion contained meaning. Survival depended on reading them correctly. Hours passed in tense observation. Jeremy moved carefully through the courtyard, each step a test of discipline and focus. He noted the subtle changes in the fog, the way shadows responded to his visualizations, the cadence of whispers adjusting to his mental barriers. Each observation was a fragment of understanding, each fragment a tool for survival. A sudden movement near the fountain drew his attention, a shadow elongating unnaturally, stretching across the courtyard. Jeremy froze, pulse racing, and the whispers intensified, overlapping into a cacophony. Jeremy, you are learning, but knowledge alone will not save you. Endure. He pressed his palms together, reinforcing the symbols, repeating the incantations, and holding firm against the pressure of the figure and the town itself. Time seemed suspended as he stood there, every muscle tensed, every sense alert. The tattered figure did not strike, only observed, patient and eternal. Jeremy understood now that confrontation was irrelevant. Survival depended on comprehension, endurance, and unwavering discipline. Fear alone would destroy him. Knowledge and willpower were the only defenses that mattered. Suddenly, a faint glimmer at the fountain's base caught his eye. Jeremy knelt and examined it carefully. A small, carved symbol, nearly invisible, matched one in the black book, a protective glyph designed to anchor awareness and resist intrusion. He traced it with his fingers, murmuring the corresponding incantation. The shadows recoiled slightly, the whispers faltered, and he felt a momentary sense of control. The tattered figure lingered at the edge of the courtyard, voided face absorbing light, shadows pooling and writhing at its feet. Jeremy felt the weight of its observation, patient and eternal. He knew now that Hemlock Ridge was a living entity, distributed across the town. Each figure, each shadow, each ripple of fog a fragment of its consciousness. Survival required understanding the whole as much as resisting the parts. As the day waned, the fog thickened again, curling along the edges of buildings and creeping into the courtyard. The whispers became a low hum, constant and insistent, reminding him that the town never rested, never forgot, and never forgave. Jeremy traced more protective symbols along the fountain and the surrounding pavement, rehearsing incantations, reinforcing mental barriers. The tattered figure remained, observing, patient, a teacher and a predator intertwined. The sun's pale light faded, replaced by the oppressive gray of approaching night. Jeremy knew that the figure would return, that the whispers would grow louder, more insistent, and that shadows would creep closer. But he also knew that each encounter strengthened him, expanded his comprehension, and reinforced the fragile control he could assert against Hemlock Ridge. Survival was not avoidance or confrontation. It was understanding, endurance, and unwavering discipline. The courtyard fell silent, save for the distant hum of whispers and the faint rustle of fog curling around the cracked stone. Jeremy closed his eyes for a moment, focusing on the protective symbols, visualizing layers of barriers around himself, and repeating the incantations. The tattered figure receded into the shadows, leaving him with a fragile sense of accomplishment. He had survived another encounter, maintained control, and deepened his understanding of the town's subtle language. As night descended fully, the fog thickened to an almost tangible presence, curling around the courtyard, pressing against the walls, and teasing the edges of perception. Jeremy prepared himself, reinforcing symbols, repeating incantations, and visualizing barriers in intricate layers. Each night was a test, each encounter a lesson, each whisper a challenge to his endurance. The tattered figure would return, as with the shadows, and he would need all his focus, all his knowledge, and all his willpower to endure. Jeremy Caldwell understood now that survival was a continuous act of comprehension and discipline. Hemlock Ridge had claimed many before him, but he was beginning to grasp its language, its logic, and its eternal patience. Knowledge was power, comprehension was a shield, and endurance was the weapon that might allow him to survive the relentless testing of the town. Night would return, and with it the whispers, the shadows, and the tattered figure. And Jeremy would endure, step by step, night by night, learning the rules, asserting his fragile dominion over fear, and preparing for the endless trials that lay ahead. The fog had thickened into an almost tangible presence as night fell again over Hemlock Ridge, curling through the streets and alleyways like a living thing. Jeremy moved carefully, every step deliberate, senses sharpened by months of exposure to the town's patient malevolence. The black book rested in his hands, fragile yet indispensable, its pages etched with symbols, incantations, and observations that had allowed him to endure countless nights. Each encounter with the tattered figure, each whispering shadow, had been a lesson, and he carried those lessons forward like fragile armor against the relentless pressure of the town. He paused at the edge of a narrow street where the fog swirled thickest, curling around broken lampposts and leaning buildings. Shadows twisted unnaturally in the dim light, pooling and stretching as if the very air resisted him. The whispers began, low at first, teasing at the edges of perception, then growing in layered intensity. Jeremy, we watch, we test, endure, come. He pressed his palms together, visualizing protective symbols in the air around him, repeating the incantations from memory, and reinforcing mental barriers like invisible walls of will. The street seemed endless, bending and curving in ways that defied logic. Jeremy noticed subtle distortions in the fog, ripples that indicated the town's sentient presence, its attention drawn to him. He moved slowly, deliberately, interpreting the signals, aware that every twitch of shadow, every flicker of light, every whisper was a piece of the town's language. Understanding these cues was not enough. He had to respond, to anticipate, to endure. From the corner of his eye he saw movement, a shadow stretching unnaturally, bending and twisting in impossible ways. The tattered figure emerged from the fog at the street's end, taller than any man, voided face absorbing the dim light, shadows pooling at its feet. Jeremy felt the familiar surge of fear, but he refused to yield. Fear alone would destroy him. Comprehension, endurance, and discipline were his only allies. He visualized the protective symbols, repeated the incantations, and reinforced his mental barriers. The figure moved slowly, deliberately, testing his focus, probing the limits of his endurance. Shadows writhed at its feet, creeping closer but never crossing the boundaries Jeremy maintained. The whispers intensified, layering over themselves in a chaotic, almost musical cadence, pressing against his mind with insistent repetition. Jeremy, understand. Endure. The lesson is near. He focused, filtering the voices through his heightened awareness, holding firm against the pressure. The street opened into a small plaza, its center dominated by a broken fountain. Water, long dried, moss-covered stones crumbling, the remnants of a town that had decayed over decades. Jeremy approached the fountain carefully, tracing protective symbols along its edges, murmuring incantations, and visualizing layers of mental barriers. The whispers pressed closer, probing for weakness, but he maintained focus, understanding that survival depended on observation, comprehension, and endurance. A faint distortion in the fog caught his attention, a subtle ripple indicating the town's hidden message. Jeremy reached toward it, hand trembling slightly. Visions flickered before him, fragments of past nights, faces twisted in terror, shadows writhing independently, whispers overlapping in unintelligible yet meaningful patterns. The tattered figure moved closer, shadows pooling, observing, patient, eternal. Jeremy staggered but held the black book before him, grounding his mind. The whispers shifted, forming coherent phrases. Jeremy. See? Understand. Endure. Knowledge is your shield. His pulse quickened, but he focused, recognizing that these fragments were instructions embedded in terror. The town taught through fear, yet understanding its language provided a fragile shield, a temporary mastery over the relentless pressure that surrounded him. The tattered figure glided closer, voided face absorbing the dim light, shadows writhing at its feet. Jeremy held firm, visualizing protective symbols, repeating incantations, and focusing his mind. The whispers layered themselves over each other, testing his ability to maintain composure and comprehension under duress. He understood now that the figure was a teacher as much as a predator, each encounter a lesson in endurance and observation. Hours, or perhaps minutes, as time distorted in Hemlock Ridge, passed in tense observation. Jeremy moved carefully around the plaza, noting the subtle shifts in the fog, the reactions of shadows to his protective symbols, and the cadence of whispers as he strengthened mental barriers. Each detail was a fragment of comprehension, each observation a tool for survival. A sudden flicker at the fountain's base caught his attention. Jeremy knelt and examined it, discovering a faint carving, a symbol matching one in the black book. He traced it with his fingers, murmuring the corresponding incantation. The shadows recoiled slightly, the whispers faltered, and he felt a fleeting sense of control, a temporary foothold against the relentless intelligence of the town. The tattered figure lingered at the plaza's edge, patient and eternal, observing, measuring, testing. Jeremy realized that Hemlock Ridge was not merely a place but a sentient presence, distributed across every building, every shadow, every ripple in the fog. Survival demanded comprehension of the whole, not just reaction to individual threats. Each step, each observation, each incantation reinforced a fragile dominion over fear, temporary but necessary. As night deepened, the fog thickened further, pressing against the edges of the plaza, curling around walls and debris, teasing the limits of perception. The whispers became a low hum, omnipresent and constant, reminding him that the town never rested, never forgave, and never forgot. Jeremy traced more protective symbols along the fountain and the surrounding stones, rehearsing incantations, reinforcing mental barriers. The tattered figure remained, patient, observing, a teacher and predator intertwined. He moved carefully through the plaza, each gesture deliberate, each step a conscious act of negotiation with the town. The fog shifted subtly with his movements, a living extension of Hemlock Ridge's awareness, testing comprehension, measuring endurance, assessing discipline. Jeremy's pulse remained steady, mind focused, as he reinforced the fragile balance he had established. Suddenly, a low groan echoed through the plaza, a sound that seemed to emanate from the very ground itself. Shadows writhed more violently at the tattered figure's feet, stretching and twisting unnaturally. The whispers rose in intensity, overlapping into a chaotic chorus. Jeremy, you are learning. But understanding is not enough. Endure. He pressed his palms together, visualized symbols in layers, repeated incantations, and held firm, refusing to succumb to the pressure. Time distorted further, each minute stretching into an eternity. The tattered figure did not strike, only observed, testing the limits of his discipline and comprehension. Jeremy understood now that survival was not a matter of fighting or fleeing, but of endurance, awareness, and the ability to read the town's complex language of shadows, fog, and whispers. Each night, each encounter, each ripple of perception was a lesson, a fragment of knowledge to be used in the ongoing struggle. As dawn approached, the fog began to thin slightly, the first pale light filtering through the oppressive gray. The tattered figure receded into the shadows, leaving Jeremy alone in the plaza. Exhaustion mingled with a fragile sense of accomplishment. He had survived another encounter, maintained control, and deepened his understanding of the town's hidden language. The whispers softened to a low hum, reminding him that Hemlock Ridge was eternal, patient, and ever watchful. Jeremy gripped the black book tightly, aware that survival depended on continued vigilance, comprehension, and endurance. Each night was a trial, each encounter a test, each whisper a challenge to his will. The tattered figure would return, as would the shadows, and he would need all his focus, knowledge, and discipline to endure. Jeremy Caldwell had learned that survival was a continuous act of comprehension and willpower. Hemlock Ridge had claimed many before him, but he was beginning to grasp its patterns, its logic, and its relentless patience. Knowledge was power, comprehension was a shield, and endurance was the weapon that might allow him to survive the relentless testing of the town. Night would return, bringing whispers, shadows, and the tattered figure, and Jeremy would endure, step by step, night by night, learning the rules, asserting fragile dominion over fear, and preparing for the trials yet to come. Night descended again on Hemlock Ridge, thicker, heavier, more oppressive than ever. Jeremy moved through the fog-choked streets with the black book clutched tightly in his hands. Each step was deliberate, each breath measured. The town had become a living labyrinth. Every shadow, every flicker of light, every whisper a potential threat or instruction. He had survived countless nights, endured encounters with the tattered figure, and yet, the oppressive intelligence of Hemlock Ridge seemed to grow with each passing hour. Its patience was eternal, its observation relentless. Understanding and endurance were no longer just survival tools. They were necessities. The street before him was narrow, buildings leaning inward, almost pressing upon the pathway like sentinels. Shadows twisted unnaturally at the edges of his vision, pooling and stretching in ways that defied logic. Whispers began softly, a low murmur threading through his mind. Jeremy, we see you. We measure. We test. Endure. He pressed his palms together, visualized protective symbols, and recited incantations under his breath, reinforcing mental barriers. Each night, he realized, was a complex negotiation with the town itself, a test of comprehension, discipline, and endurance. A sudden flicker in the fog drew his attention. Shadows elongated, bending in impossible ways, moving as if with intent. The tattered figure emerged at the end of the street, taller than any human, void-faced, absorbing the pale light from distant lanterns. Shadows pooled at its feet, writhing and crawling along the cobblestones. Jeremy's pulse quickened, but he forced himself to remain calm. Fear was the weapon Hemlock Ridge wielded most effectively. Discipline and comprehension were his shields. He advanced carefully, each step deliberate. The figure did not immediately pursue, but observed, patient and eternal. Shadows stretched toward him, probing the limits of his focus. Whispers overlapped, a layered cacophony pressing against his mind. Jeremy, understand, endure, the lesson is near. He filtered the voices, strengthened mental barriers, visualized intricate protective symbols, and held firm. Every movement, every ripple in the fog, every distortion of shadow had meaning. Survival demanded attention to detail, comprehension of subtle cues, and mastery of fear. The street opened into a small courtyard, dominated by a fountain long drained of water. The stone was cracked, moss-covered, and the remnants of decay whispered of centuries of neglect. Jeremy approached carefully, tracing protective symbols along the fountain's edges, murmuring incantations. The whispers pressed closer, probing, insistent. He focused on the glyphs, the incantations, and the symbols in the black book, reinforcing a fragile barrier against the town's sentient malice. A subtle ripple in the fog indicated the town's attention, its language encoded in distortions of air and light. Jeremy extended a hand, feeling the distortion vibrate faintly under his touch. Visions flashed before him, fragments of past nights, twisted faces, shadows writhing independently, whispers overlapping in complex patterns. The tattered figure moved closer, shadows pooling, observing, measuring. Jeremy staggered but held the black book in front of him, grounding his mind. The whispers became coherent. Jeremy. See. Understand. Endure. Knowledge is your shield. His pulse raced, but he remained focused. The visions, terrifying as they were, carried instruction. Hemlock Ridge taught through fear, but comprehension of its language offered a temporary shield, a momentary mastery over the relentless pressure that surrounded him. Survival depended on learning, observing, and enduring. The tattered figure advanced, gliding silently, shadows writhing at its feet. Jeremy maintained protective symbols, repeated incantations, and filtered the whispers through the heightened awareness. The figure's presence was overwhelming, yet he understood its purpose: to teach through observation, to test endurance, and to measure comprehension. Each encounter was a lesson disguised as terror, a challenge designed to expand his understanding of the town. Time became fluid, minutes stretching into hours. Jeremy moved deliberately through the courtyard, observing the fog's movements, the shadows' reactions, and the cadence of whispers as he reinforced mental barriers. Each observation was a fragment of comprehension, each fragment a tool for survival. He understood now that Hemlock Ridge was more than buildings and fog. It was intelligence, dispersed across the streets, shadows and whispers, patient and unyielding. A faint glimmer at the fountain's base caught his eye. He knelt and examined it, discovering a small, carved symbol matching one in the black book. He traced it with his fingers, murmuring the corresponding incantation. The shadows recoiled slightly, the whispers faltered, and a fleeting sense of control washed over him. It was fragile, temporary, but enough to give him leverage over the town's sentient presence. The tattered figure lingered at the courtyard's edge, void-faced, shadows writhing at its feet, observing with patient intensity. Jeremy realized that survival was no longer about hiding or fleeing. It was comprehension, endurance, and mental discipline. Every night, each shadow, every ripple of fog, and every whisper was a lesson in the town's language. Each step required observation. Each breath demanded focus. Each heartbeat was a test. As the night deepened, the fog thickened, curling around the courtyard, pressing against walls and cobblestones, teasing perception. The whispers became a low hum, omnipresent and insistent, reminding him that Hemlock Ridge never rested, never forgave, never forgot. Jeremy traced protective symbols along the fountain and surrounding pavement, rehearsing incantations, reinforcing barriers. The tattered figure remained, patient, a teacher and predator intertwined. He moved cautiously, each gesture deliberate, each step a conscious act of negotiation with the town. The fog shifted with him, alive, responding to his movements, testing comprehension, measuring endurance, assessing discipline. Jeremy's mind remained focused, pulse steady, as he reinforced the fragile balance he had established. A low groan echoed through the courtyard, emanating from the ground itself. Shadows writhed violently at the tattered figure's feet, stretching and twisting unnaturally. The whispers rose into a chaotic chorus. Jeremy, you are learning. But understanding is not enough. Endure. He pressed his palms together, visualizing intricate symbols, repeating incantations and holding firm, refusing to yield to the town's pressure. Time became distorted, each minute stretching into an eternity. The tattered figure remained stationary, observing, testing the limits of discipline and comprehension. Jeremy understood that survival was not combat, but endurance, not flight, but comprehension, and not strength, but discipline. Each night, each encounter, each ripple of perception was a lesson, a fragment of knowledge, a step toward mastery of fear. As dawn approached, the fog thinned slightly. The tattered figure receded, leaving Jeremy alone. Exhaustion mingled with a fragile sense of accomplishment. He had survived another encounter, maintained control, and deepened his understanding of Hemlock Ridge's hidden language. The whispers softened to a hum, a constant reminder that the town was eternal, patient, and observant. Jeremy gripped the black book, aware that survival required continued vigilance, comprehension, and endurance. Each night was a test, each encounter a trial, each whisper a challenge. The tattered figure would return, the shadows would creep closer, and he would need all his focus, knowledge, and discipline to endure. He had learned that survival was a continuous act of comprehension and willpower. Hemlock Ridge had claimed many before him, but he was beginning to grasp its patterns, its logic, and its unyielding patience. Knowledge was power, comprehension was a shield, and endurance was the weapon that might allow him to survive the relentless testing of the town. Night would return, bringing whispers, shadows, and the tattered figure. Jeremy would endure, step by step, night by night, learning the rules, asserting fragile dominion over fear, and preparing for the trials yet to come. The fog had returned thicker than ever, swallowing Hemlock Ridge in a gray, suffocating shroud. Jeremy moved with deliberate care. Every footstep, a negotiation with the town's unseen intelligence. The black book in his hands was worn, pages creased and fragile, but it was a lifeline, a repository of knowledge that had guided him through countless encounters with the tattered figure and the whispering shadows. Each night had sharpened his senses, strengthened his comprehension, and forced him to endure in ways he had never imagined possible. He paused near the edge of an empty square, where the buildings leaned inward like silent, accusing sentinels. Shadows twisted and stretched unnaturally in the dim, muted light. The whispers began immediately, threading through his consciousness. Jeremy, we observe, we test, endure, understand. He pressed his palms together, visualized the protective symbols, and recited the incantations quietly under his breath, reinforcing mental barriers. Survival here demanded constant vigilance, comprehension of subtle cues, and mastery of fear. A sudden ripple in the fog drew his attention. Shadows bent and contorted as if alive, moving with intent. The tattered figure emerged from the mist at the far edge of the square, void-faced, tall, imposing, its presence suffocating. Shadows pooled at its feet, creeping toward Jeremy, testing the limits of his focus. He inhaled slowly, grounding himself, refusing to yield to panic. Fear would only feed the town. Comprehension and discipline were his shields. He advanced cautiously, each step deliberate. The figure did not immediately pursue, but watched, patient, eternal. Shadows writhed, stretching, but respecting the fragile boundaries Jeremy had established. The whispers layered over themselves, forming a chaotic yet coherent rhythm in his mind. Jeremy, learn, endure, knowledge shields, patience strengthens. He focused, filtering the voices, reinforcing mental barriers, visualizing the intricate symbols that had become his armor. The square opened into a courtyard dominated by the remnants of an old well, its stones cracked and moss-covered. Jeremy approached carefully, tracing protective symbols along the stones, murmuring the incantations that anchored his awareness. The whispers pressed closer, probing for weakness, but he held his focus, understanding that survival depended on observation, comprehension, and endurance. A subtle distortion in the fog indicated the town's attention, its language encoded in the ripples of air and the shifting shadows. Jeremy extended a hand, feeling the ripple vibrate faintly under his touch. Fragments of vision flickered before him. Twisted faces, shadows writhing independently, whispers overlapping in complex patterns. The tattered figure glided closer, shadows pooling, observing, measuring. Jeremy staggered slightly, but the black book grounded his mind, each symbol and incantation reinforcing his fragile control. The whispers coalesced. Jeremy. See? Comprehend. Endure. The lesson deepens. His pulse raced, but he remained steady. These visions, terrifying as they were, carried instruction. Hemlock Ridge taught through fear, yet comprehension offered temporary mastery over the town's relentless pressure. Survival required learning, observation, and endurance, not flight or confrontation. The tattered figure moved again, gliding, shadows writhing at its feet. Jeremy maintained his protective symbols, repeated incantations, and filtered the whispers through disciplined focus. He understood now that the figure's purpose was dual, predator and teacher, instilling terror while providing instruction. Each encounter was a trial, each ripple of perception a fragment of knowledge to be assimilated. Time stretched unnaturally, minutes becoming hours. Jeremy moved cautiously around the courtyard, noting the subtle changes in fog, the reactions of shadows to his symbols, and the cadence of whispers. Each detail was a fragment of understanding, each observation a tool for survival. Hemlock Ridge was more than buildings and fog. It was intelligence, a sentient presence dispersed across the town, patient, observant, relentless. A faint glimmer at the base of the well caught his eye. Jeremy knelt, examining the carved symbol etched into the stone, matching one in the black book. He traced it with his fingers, murmuring the corresponding incantation. Shadows recoiled slightly, whispers faltered, and a temporary sense of control washed over him. It was fragile, but sufficient to offer leverage against the town's sentient awareness. The tattered figure remained at the courtyard's edge, void-faced, shadows writhing, observing with patient intensity. Jeremy realized that survival was no longer about hiding or fleeing. It was comprehension, endurance, and mental discipline. Every shadow, every ripple, every whisper carried instruction. Each night, each encounter, each subtle distortion in the environment offered a lesson to those who could read the town's language. As the night deepened, fog thickened, curling around the courtyard, pressing against walls and stones, teasing perception. The whispers became a constant hum, omnipresent, a reminder that Hemlock Ridge never rested, never forgave, never forgot. Jeremy traced more symbols along the well and surrounding pavement, rehearsed incantations, and reinforced mental barriers. The tattered figure remained, patient, eternal, both teacher and predator. He moved cautiously, each gesture deliberate, each step a conscious act of negotiation with the town's intelligence. The fog shifted in response, alive, testing comprehension, measuring endurance, assessing discipline. Jeremy's mind remained steady, pulse controlled, as he maintained fragile dominion over fear. A low groan emanated from the courtyard, resonating through the stones themselves. Shadows writhed more violently at the figure's feet, stretching and twisting unnaturally. The whispers rose to a chaotic chorus. Jeremy, you are learning, but knowledge alone will not save you. Endure. He pressed his palms together, visualized intricate symbols, repeated incantations, and held firm, refusing to yield to pressure. Time became distorted, each second stretching into eternity. The tattered figure did not strike, only observed, testing the limits of endurance and comprehension. Jeremy understood now that survival was not a matter of fighting or fleeing. It was endurance, observation, and the ability to read the town's language of fog, shadows, and whispers. Each night, each encounter, each subtle ripple was a lesson, a fragment of knowledge, a step toward mastery of fear. As dawn approached, the fog thinned slightly, and the tattered figure receded into the shadows. Jeremy was left alone in the courtyard. Exhaustion mingled with a fragile sense of accomplishment. He had survived another encounter, maintained control, and deepened his understanding of the town's hidden language. The whispers softened to a low hum, reminding him that Hemlock Ridge was eternal, patient, and watchful. Jeremy clutched the black book, aware that survival required continued vigilance, comprehension, and endurance. Each night was a trial, each encounter a challenge, each whisper a test of will. The tattered figure would return, shadows would creep closer, and he would need all his focus, knowledge, and discipline to endure. He had learned that survival was a continuous act of comprehension and willpower. Hemlock Ridge had claimed many before him, but he was beginning to grasp its logic, its patience, and its unyielding intelligence. Knowledge was power, comprehension a shield, and endurance the weapon that might allow him to withstand the relentless testing of the town. Night would return, bringing whispers, shadows, and the tattered figure. And Jeremy would endure, step by step, night by night, learning the rules, asserting fragile dominion over fear, and preparing for the trials yet to come. The night was absolute. Hemlock Ridge lay beneath a dense, suffocating fog, thick enough to erase the familiar outlines of streets, buildings, and even time itself. Jeremy moved cautiously, senses heightened, black book clutched in his hands, pages worn and fragile from countless nights of study. Every step, every breath, every heartbeat was a negotiation with the town's sentient intelligence. He had endured so many nights, survived encounters with the tattered figure, interpreted the whispers, and read the subtle language of shadows and fog. Yet, tonight felt different. The pressure was heavier, more insistent, as if Hemlock Ridge itself had taken note of his understanding and was preparing a test unlike any before. He paused near the center of a courtyard long abandoned, where the remnants of an ancient fountain lay in ruin. Moss-covered stones jutted out unevenly, and water had long ceased to flow. Shadows twisted unnaturally along the walls, moving independently, forming grotesque shapes in the dim, sickly light. The whispers began softly, threading through his consciousness. Jeremy. Tonight, we observe, we test, endure, understand. He pressed his palms together, visualized protective symbols in intricate layers, and recited incantations under his breath. Every night had taught him that survival demanded not only focus, but constant adaptation. From the corner of his eye, a distortion in the fog flickered, a subtle ripple of awareness that indicated the town's intelligence was near. The tattered figure emerged from the mist, taller than ever, void-faced, a presence that seemed to suck the light from the world around it. Shadows writhed at its feet, creeping toward Jeremy, probing for weakness, testing the limits of his comprehension. He inhaled slowly, grounding himself, refusing to yield to instinctual fear. Fear was a tool of Hemlock Ridge. Comprehension and discipline were his defenses. He advanced carefully, each step deliberate. The figure did not immediately pursue, but watched, patient and eternal. Shadows stretched and twisted, testing boundaries, but Jeremy's protective symbols held. The whispers overlapped in a complex cadence, a layered assault on his concentration. Jeremy. Knowledge shields. Comprehension sustains. Endure. He focused, filtering the voices, reinforcing mental barriers, visualizing intricate symbols around him, each layer stronger than the last. The courtyard seemed to stretch unnaturally, boundaries expanding and contracting as if the town itself were breathing. Jeremy moved toward the base of the fountain, tracing protective symbols along the cracked stone, murmuring incantations, and reinforcing the fragile control he had established. Each shadow, each distortion in the fog, each whispered phrase carried meaning. Survival depended on perceiving and interpreting every fragment of the town's subtle language. A sudden ripple in the fog caused Jeremy to flinch. The tattered figure's voided gaze was upon him, observing with patient intensity. Shadows writhed violently, pooling and stretching across the courtyard. The whispers overlapped, forming coherent phrases. Jeremy, you endure, you comprehend. Yet the final lesson awaits, understand or fail. His pulse quickened, but he pressed his palms together, visualizing protective symbols in layers, repeating incantations, reinforcing mental barriers. This night would test not only his knowledge but his endurance, his will, and his ability to integrate everything he had learned. Time became fluid, minutes stretching into hours as Jeremy moved deliberately around the courtyard. He observed the subtle distortions in fog, the reactions of shadows to his symbols, and the cadence of whispers. Each observation was a fragment of understanding, each fragment a tool for survival. Hemlock Ridge was more than a collection of streets and buildings. It was sentient, intelligent, eternal, and relentless. Each step, each breath, each heartbeat mattered. A faint glimmer at the fountain's base drew his attention. He knelt, tracing a carved symbol matching one in the black book, murmuring the corresponding incantation. Shadows recoiled slightly, whispers faltered, and he felt a temporary foothold, a momentary sense of control over the town's sentient presence. It was fragile, fleeting, but necessary. The tattered figure lingered, void-faced, shadows writhing at its feet, observing, measuring, patient and eternal. Jeremy understood that survival was no longer a matter of hiding or fleeing. It was comprehension, endurance, and disciplined focus. Every night, every shadow, every ripple of fog, every whisper carried instruction. Hemlock Ridge taught through fear, yet those who could understand and endure could carve out moments of control within its oppressive presence. The whispers rose in intensity, overlapping into a chaotic chorus. Jeremy, you have learned, yet mastery demands more. Endure, understand, integrate. He pressed his palms together, visualized protective symbols in intricate layers, repeated incantations, and held firm. Each heartbeat was a test, each movement an exercise in discipline, each thought a weapon against the town's relentless pressure. A sudden distortion in the fog drew his gaze upward. Shadows coalesced into shapes that hinted at memories he could not fully recall, fragments of terror, of figures lost to the town, of lessons passed in whispered terror. The tattered figure moved closer, its voided gaze unblinking, shadows writhing, encroaching. Jeremy maintained his focus, drawing strength from the black book, from his knowledge, from his comprehension of the town's subtle, intelligent rhythms. Time fractured, minutes stretching, hours compressing. Jeremy moved deliberately, each action precise, each observation deliberate. He traced symbols, repeated incantations, and held mental focus like a fragile lifeline. Shadows writhed around him. The whispers pressed harder, yet he maintained control. Understanding was no longer optional. It was essential. Endurance was no longer a tactic. It was survival. The tattered figure's presence grew more oppressive, shadows pooling, rippling with malevolent awareness. Jeremy pressed his palms together, visualized layered protective symbols, and murmured incantations. The whispers layered themselves into patterns, testing comprehension, endurance, and mental discipline. Jeremy understood that this night was the culmination of everything he had learned. The final lesson demanded integration, comprehension, endurance, observation, and the ability to act under extreme duress. Suddenly, a low groan resonated from the stones of the courtyard itself, shadows writhing violently at the figure's feet, twisting, stretching, distorting reality. The whispers became a chaotic, multi-layered chorus. Jeremy, integrate, master, endure, or succumb. He visualized intricate symbols, repeated incantations, reinforced mental barriers, and focused every fiber of his being. Fear alone could no longer touch him. Comprehension and willpower were his weapons. Time dissolved. Jeremy moved with precision, tracing protective symbols along every surface, repeating incantations, interpreting the town's language of shadows and fog, integrating lessons from every prior encounter. The tattered figure glided closer, shadows pooling, yet Jeremy held firm, a fragile island of comprehension within a sea of malevolence. The fog shifted suddenly, curling, coiling, pressing against him with a weight that seemed to carry centuries of observation and malice. Whispers layered upon whispers, overlapping, yet Jeremy filtered, deciphered, integrated. The tattered figure loomed, patient, eternal, but he maintained his focus. The final lesson was not merely to endure or comprehend. It was to integrate, to act with awareness, to survive within the sentient intelligence of Hemlock Ridge. Minutes, hours, perhaps eternities passed. The figure remained. The shadows writhed, the fog twisted. Jeremy held his focus, reinforcing symbols, repeating incantations, observing every movement, every distortion, every ripple of the town's sentient presence. He realized then that he had achieved a fragile mastery, a temporary dominion over the relentless intelligence that had claimed so many before him. Knowledge, comprehension, and endurance had coalesced into a weapon, and he wielded it with unwavering discipline. As dawn approached, the fog began to thin, light spilling weakly over the courtyard. The tattered figure receded into the mist, leaving Jeremy alone. Exhaustion mingled with a fragile triumph. He had survived, endured, and learned the final lesson Hemlock Ridge had to offer: integration. The whispers softened to a low hum, a constant reminder that the town's intelligence was eternal, patient, and watchful, but that comprehension and endurance had carved a temporary sanctuary. Jeremy clutched the black book, aware that survival required continued vigilance, comprehension, and discipline. Each night remained a trial, each encounter a challenge, each whisper a test of will. The tattered figure would return, shadows would creep, and the town's presence would press endlessly. But he had learned the final lesson: to endure, to comprehend, and to integrate. Fear was no longer his master. Comprehension and willpower had become his weapons, and within that fragile dominion, he had survived. Hemlock Ridge would continue, eternal and relentless. But Jeremy Caldwell had learned to move within it, to read its subtle language, to endure its pressures, and to assert a fragile control. Night after night, whisper after whisper, shadow after shadow, he would continue to survive. The lessons were complete, yet the vigilance would never end. Knowledge was power, comprehension a shield, endurance a weapon, and integration the key to survival. The town had tested him, taught him, and yet he remained, a solitary figure in the fog, unbroken, determined, and vigilant.